The hollowing depths, a descent into madness and terror. Deep beneath the Appalachian mountains, where the air clings to the scent of damp earth and decay, lies a labyrinth of forgotten caves known as the Hollowing Depth. For generations, locals have whispered about an ancient curse that haunts these caverns, a place where black magic and necromancy were once practiced by a secretive cult. The story of the Hollowing Depths is one of darkness, betrayal, and the thin line between reality and madness as it follows Emma Carter, a marine biologist whose estranged brother, Daniel, vanishes after exploring the caves for his research on subterranean ecosystems. When Emma receives a frantic voicemail from Daniel, her world begins to unravel. His voice is trembling and he speaks of strange carvings on the cave walls, runes he calls them, and voices that call his name. "I found something," he says, "but I think it's found me too." The line goes dead, and Daniel disappears. Determined to find her brother, Emma travels to Blackwood Hollow, the small, eerie town that looms over the caves. She brings along her loyal dog, Max, whose growing agitation as they approach the forest signals that something is terribly wrong. The forest itself seems to breathe. Trees twist into gnarled shapes, their branches creaking with an otherworldly rhythm. Max growls at unseen threats, his fur standing on end as they venture closer to the caves. The ground beneath their feet is soft and spongy, as if the earth itself is alive and watching. Emma presses on, her heart pounding in her chest, until she reaches the entrance of the caves, a gaping maw in the earth that seems to swallow the light around it. The air inside is thick and heavy, filled with the stench of rot and something far worse, something metallic, like blood. As Emma delves deeper into the mystery, she uncovers a chilling connection between her family and the cursed land. Her investigation leads her through eerie forests, abandoned mine shafts, and finally into the depths of the cave itself. The walls of the caves are slick with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoes through the chambers like a steady heartbeat. Shadows dance on the walls, cast by the flickering light of her torch, and the air grows colder with every step. But Emma is not alone. The caves are alive with an unnatural presence, something that feeds on despair and bloodlines tainted by dark rituals. She begins to experience vivid hallucinations, visions of herself standing over a sacrificial altar, a knife dripping with blood in her hand. When she wakes, the dirt under her fingernails matches the soil found only deep within the caves. Her schizophrenia, a condition she has struggled with for years, blurs the line between reality and illusion, making her question everything she sees and hears. As the days pass, the town of Blackwood Hollow reveals its secrets. Emma reconnects with Sarah, an old friend who warns her against entering the caves. "People don't come back," Sarah says cryptically. But it's Thomas, a local historian researching the Corwin cult, who harbors sinister intentions. He believes Emma is the key to breaking the seal on the caves and releasing Ezekiel, the cult leader who is thought to be long dead. Thomas's charm hides a dark agenda, and Emma begins to suspect that he is not what he seems. The caves themselves are a labyrinth of terror. Animal carcasses appear, arranged in grotesque patterns that mirror the runes Daniel described in his voicemail. Max, Emma's loyal dog, starts acting aggressively towards strangers, especially Thomas. One morning he vanishes without a trace. Following claw marks scratched into the ground, Emma finds herself face to face with the same shadowy figures that Daniel encountered. They whisper warnings, their voices echoing in her mind long after she's left the caves. As the mystery deepens, Emma discovers a diary hidden among Daniel's belongings. The journal details his encounters with the shadowy figures and the rituals he stumbled upon. Pages are torn out, smeared with ink that looks like dried blood. When Emma reads aloud from the diary, candles flicker and the air grows icy cold. Shadows shaped like skeletal hands reach out to her, and the wind howls outside with a mournful whistle. In a shocking twist, Sarah confesses that she knew about the curse all along but kept quiet to protect Emma. But during this confrontation, Thomas arrives unexpectedly, revealing that he orchestrated everything, from Max's disappearance to planting false memories in Emma's mind using cursed artifact. He plans to complete the ritual Ezekiel started, sacrificing Emma to resurrect him fully. And then, in another shocking twist, Sarah turns out to be possessed by Ezekiel's spirit, manipulating events from the shadows. As Emma fights back, her schizophrenia spirals out of control. She struggles to differentiate between allies and enemies, reality and illusion. In a climactic scene, she confronts Thomas in the heart of the caves, where a pentagram drawn in ash glows ominously. The air is thick with the sound of dripping water and the screech of nails scraping stone. Max reappears, injured but alive, attacking Thomas to save Emma. The scene is a sensory overload. Thunder booms above, water leaks from stalactites, and the sound of scraping stone fills the air. In the final confrontation, Emma uses knowledge gleaned from Daniel's journal to perform a desperate counter-ritual, invoking white magic to trap Ezekiel's spirit permanently. But the cost is high. She must sacrifice herself to seal the portal. As light consumes the room, Emma feels a sense of peace she hasn't known in years. Max howls mournfully as she collapses, her body dissolves into ash. Months later, Sarah inherits Daniel's research, vowing to keep its secrets buried. Yet, late at night, she swears she hears faint whispers, and sometimes a soft voice calling her name. The legend of the caves. Deep beneath the Appalachian mountains, where the air is thick with mist and the trees lean in as if listening, lies a place so shrouded in mystery that even the bravest souls dare not speak its name aloud. They call it the Hollowing Depths, a labyrinth of ancient caves where shadows writhe like living things, and the sound of dripping water echoes like a chorus of forgotten spirits. This is a place where the veil between worlds is thin, where the past clings to the present like a chilling embrace, and where the very earth seems to hum with the weight of unspeakable evils. Centuries ago, in a time when superstition ruled the land, a cult led by a man named Ezekiel Corwin made this cavern system their sanctuary. Ezekiel was no ordinary man. He was a charismatic figure with eyes that burned with an unnatural hunger. He preached of immortality and power, drawing in followers who were as desperate as they were deceived. Together they delved deep into the caves, seeking not solace but something far darker, eternal life. Their rituals were unspeakable, involving bloodshed and dark incantations that echoed through the caverns like the howls of damned souls. They summoned things that should never have been called, beings from beyond the mortal realm, and they paid the price in flesh and soul. But the villagers of Blackwood Hollow, the small town that rests atop the caves, grew uneasy. They heard the whispers, saw the shadows that lingered too long, and sensed the evil that seeped from the earth like a creeping rot. When they finally gathered the courage to confront the cult, they found atrocities that no human should ever witness. The caves ran red with blood, and the air reeked of something unholy. The villagers, driven by fear and desperate need to protect their homes, did what they thought was necessary. They sealed the entrance to the hollowing depths with heavy stones, using white magic to bind the curse and trap whatever evil lurked within. They believed they had rid their world of Ezekiel and his followers, but legends never truly die. Whispers persisted, passed down through generations, warning that Ezekiel was not destroyed but merely waiting. Some say he remains in the shadows, his spirit tethered to the earth, biding his time until someone from his bloodline unlocks the seal. Others claim that on certain nights, when the moon hides its face, you can still hear the faint chant of his followers, their voices echoing through the caves like a haunting refrain. The caves themselves seem alive, as though they exhale and inhale with a breath that feels almost human. The walls are jagged and slick with moisture, shimmering faintly in the dim light. Water drips, Drip, drip, the sound echoing endlessly, and somewhere, far in the distance, you might hear the faint rustle of unknown things moving in the darkness. The air smells of damp earth and decay, a scent that clings to your skin long after you've left the caves behind. For generations, the people of Blackwood Hollow have avoided the caves, crossing the street to avoid the sealed entrance, and refusing to speak of the legend. But the curiosity of youth often outweighs the caution of age. Every so often, a brave soul, or a reckless one, ventures into the caves, driven by a morbid curiosity or a desire to prove the legend wrong. Few return, and those who do are never the same. They speak of shadows that follow them, of voices that whisper their name, and of an overwhelming sense of dread that clings to them like a shroud. And so, the legend of the hollowing depths persists, a cautionary tale of what happens when humanity dares to meddle with forces beyond its control. It is a story of black magic and white magic, of curses and redemption, of the thin line between reality and madness. It is a story that reminds us that some secrets are better left buried, and that the past has a way of clawing its way back into the present. But for now, the caves remain sealed, their entrance hidden behind overgrown vegetation and time. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of a warning. Leave this place alone. A brother lost. The voicemail crackled with static, Daniel's voice trembling at the other end. Emma, I need your help. The caves, they're not what I thought. There are these symbols, like runes, and I keep hearing my name. It's everywhere. The line went dead. Emma's heart pounded as she stared at her phone, the screen dim in the evening light. 2 days had passed since Daniel's last call, and now this. She knew that tone, fear mixed with something darker, more sinister. Grabbing her jacket and keys, Emma decided to head to Blackwood Hollow. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her dog, Max, a loyal golden retriever with a keen sense of unease, followed closely as she packed a small bag. His eyes watched her every move, as if sensing the gravity of their journey. The drive to Blackwood Hollow was long, the winding roads framed by dense forests that grew darker with each mile. The GPS led her through a town that seemed frozen in time, its streets lined with old weathered houses and a main street devoid of life. The air felt heavy, and as Emma passed through, she felt unseen eyes upon her. Beyond the town lay the forest, a dense expanse of towering trees that swallowed the sunlight. The path to the caves was a dirt trail, overgrown and ominous. Emma turned off the engine, the sudden silence broken only by the wind whispering through the trees with a mournful sigh. Max, usually eager to explore, hung back, his tail tucked between his legs. As they stepped onto the trail, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet echoed the stillness. The trees loomed overhead, their branches creaking softly. Snap, crack, snap, as if warning them to turn back. Stay close, Max, Emma whispered, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. The forest was alive with sounds, a distant owl's hoot, leaves rustling, and the occasional snap of twigs. Max growled low in his throat, his ears perked up as if he sensed something she didn't. Emma quickened her pace, the caves now in sight. The entrance was a gaping mouth in the earth, dark and foreboding. Max halted abruptly, his fur standing on end. He let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the shadowy opening. Emma knelt beside him, her hand on his neck, feeling the tension ripple through him. I have to go in, she said softly, though her own doubts gnawed at her. The air around the cave seemed to vibrate with an unnatural silence, as if it were holding its breath. She hesitated, her mind flickering with the edges of a hallucination, whispers, shadows darting just out of sight. With a deep breath, Emma stood, her flashlight in hand. Wait here, she instructed Max, though he remained stubbornly by her side, his reluctance clear. Reluctantly, she stepped into the darkness, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. The cave swallowed her whole, the silence inside oppressive. Emma's footsteps echoed off the walls, each step a reminder of how alone she was. As she ventured deeper, the void seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. In the darkness, Emma's resolve hardened. She would find Daniel no matter what lay ahead. But as she walked, the shadows seemed to twist around her, hinting at secrets and dangers beyond her wildest fears. The journey had just begun, and the depths were waiting. Friends turned enemies. The small town of Blackwood Hollow was shrouded in perpetual gloom, as if the sun never truly rose over its narrow streets and weathered buildings. Emma Carter stepped out of her car, the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes echoing in the eerie silence. Her loyal dog, Max, a golden retriever with a keen sense of smell, sniffed the air. His ears perked up as if something in the wind troubled him. The trees surrounding the town swayed in the breeze, their leaves rustling softly. Hush, hush, hush. Emma had come to Blackwood Hollow searching for her brother, Daniel, who had vanished while exploring the notorious Howling depths. His last voicemail had been frantic, speaking of strange carvings and disembodied voices calling his name. But as she walked through the town, it became clear that something was off. The few people she saw avoided eye contact, their faces pale and drawn, as if they were hiding secrets. She had arranged to meet an old friend, Sarah, at the local cafe. Sarah had grown up in Blackwood Hollow, and the two had been inseparable during their teenage years. But after Emma's family moved away, they lost touch. Now as Emma pushed open the creaky door of the cafe squeak, she spotted Sarah sitting in the corner, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee. "Sarah?" Emma called out, her voice tentative. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and something else, fear perhaps. "Emma," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been so long." The two women embraced awkwardly, the tension between them palpable. Emma noticed how thin Sarah had become, her cheeks sunken, her skin pale. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Emma said, trying to lighten the mood. Sarah forced a smile. "Just not sleeping well, I guess." They sat down, the wooden chairs creaking under their weight. Groan. The cafe was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering, buzz, as if threatening to go out at any moment. Emma noticed the shadows stretching across the walls, unnaturally long and twisting in ways that seemed impossible. "So, you're here about Daniel," Sarah said, her voice laced with reluctance. "Yeah, he called me a few days ago, said something about carvings in the caves and voices. Then, nothing. I haven't heard from him since." Sarah's expression darkened. "You shouldn't be here, Emma. You shouldn't have come." "Why not?" Emma asked, her voice sharp with concern. "Because people don't come back from those caves," Sarah said cryptically, her eyes darting around the room as if she feared being overheard. "There's something wrong about that place, something evil." Before Emma could press her for more information, the cafe door swung open. Squeak, and a tall, imposing man walked in. He was dressed in a long coat, his dark hair slicked back and his eyes gleaming with an intensity that made Emma uneasy. He smiled as he approached their table, his charm immediate and disarming. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice smooth and confident. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. You were talking about the hollowing depths, I presume?" Emma exchanged a wary glance with Sarah. "Yeah," she said cautiously. "I'm looking for my brother. He went into the caves, and now he's missing." The man's smile widened. "I'm Thomas. I'm a local historian. I've been studying caves for years. If anyone can help you find your brother, it's me." Emma hesitated, unsure if she should trust this stranger. But there was something about Thomas that drew her in, a sense of authority and knowledge that was hard to dismiss. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'd appreciate any help I can get." Thomas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he began to speak. The hollowing depths are no ordinary caves. They're a place of dark history where a cult once performed unspeakable rituals. Ezekiel Corwin, the cult's leader, was obsessed with immortality. He invoked demons, sacrificed innocent lives, and, well, the stories are horrifying. As Thomas spoke, the shadows in the cafe seemed to grow longer, twisting across the walls like living things. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't look away from Thomas's intense gaze. "But it's just stories, right?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes glinting with an unsettling light. "No, Emma, it's not just stories. The caves are real, and so is the curse. Ezekiel Corwin was never found after the villagers sealed the caves. Some say he's still down there waiting for someone to set him free." Emma's heart raced as Thomas's words hung in the air. She glanced at Sarah, who was staring at her hands, her face pale. "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because," Thomas said, his voice low and urgent, "I think you're the only one who can uncover the truth. You have a connection to this place, Emma. A connection you don't even realize." Sarah suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Screech. "I need to go," she said abruptly. "But, Emma, please, don't go into those caves. You don't understand what you're dealing with." With that, she hurried out of the cafe, leaving Emma alone with Thomas. "Don't mind her," Thomas said, his smile returning. "She's just scared. But you're not. Are you, Emma?" Emma hesitated, unsure of how to answer. There was something about Thomas that didn't feel right, something beneath his charming facade that made her skin crawl. But she couldn't deny the strange pull she felt toward the caves, the overwhelming need to uncover the truth about her brother's disappearance. As she left the cafe with Thomas, the shadows seemed to follow her, stretching and twisting in ways that felt almost alive. The wind picked up, howling through the streets, whistle, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap, one from which there might be no escape. And as they disappeared into the darkness, the flickering lights of the cafe seemed to be dim, as if the very presence of evil had drained life from the room. The first vision, the night had fallen like a shroud over Blackwood Hollow. Emma sat in her dimly lit room, the faint glow of the TV casting eerie shadows on the walls. She had spent the day poring over Daniel's journal, trying to make sense of the cryptic symbols and warnings he had scrawled across the pages. Her mind raced with questions, but the answers seemed to linger just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of the forest and the depths of the caves. As the clock struck midnight, Emma's eyelids grew heavy, but her restlessness kept her awake. The silence of the room felt oppressive, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl outside her window. She tossed and turned, her thoughts spiraling into darker corners of her mind. Then, without warning, the world around her shifted. It started with a faint, muffled whisper, whisper, like voices echoing through a tunnel. The air in the room grew colder, and the shadows on the walls seemed to twist into shapes that didn't belong to anything alive. Emma's breath hitched as she sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, she was somewhere else. She stood in a vast, cavernous space, the walls jagged and dripping with water. Drip, drip. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. Torchlight flickered around her, casting shadows that danced like living darkness. At her feet lay a stone altar, its surface stained with dark, crusty residue. In her hand was a knife, its blade gleaming with an unnatural sheen. It was dripping, drip, drip, with something wet and crimson. Blood. Emma's stomach churned as she looked down at herself, her clothes smeared with dirt and streaks of red. Voices echoed around her, low and chanting. Chant, in a language she couldn't understand. They seemed to be calling her name, pulling her closer to the altar. Her mind raced, but her body felt heavy, as if controlled by an unseen force. And then, a face appeared before her. It was twisted and gaunt with hollow eyes that glowed like embers. Ezekiel Corwin, daughter. His voice was low and raspy, speaking words that felt like ice against her skin. "You are mine," he hissed. "Blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh." Emma screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the chanting. The torches flickered wildly, casting the cavern into chaos. The ground beneath her feet trembled and the voices grew louder, more urgent. Then, everything went black. When Emma came to, she was back in her bed, drenched in sweat. The TV still played in the background, but the room felt eerily quiet. Her hands trembled as she turned on the light, her breath coming in short gasps. She looked down at her hands and froze. Under her fingernails was dirt. Dark, damp soil that didn't belong in her room. Her heart pounded as she scrambled out of bed and rushed to the bathroom. She turned on the faucet and scrubbed her hands furiously, but the dirt clung stubbornly to her nails. It wasn't until she noticed a faint smear of mud on her shirt that the memory of the knife and the altar flooded back, vivid and horrifying. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The vision had felt so real, too real. But Emma knew her schizophrenia could play tricks on her mind, blurring the line between reality and illusion. Still, the dirt under her nails was undeniable. It was the same dark, rich soil Daniel had described in his voicemail, the kind found only deep within the caves. That realization sent a chill down her spine. The next morning, Emma knocked on Sarah's door, her hands still shaking. When her friend answered, Emma blurted out everything. The vision, the dirt, the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled in her bones. Sarah listened, her expression growing more somber with every word. When Emma finished, Sarah stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling. "Something I should have told you the moment you got here." "What is it?" Emma asked, her stomach twisting into knots. Sarah hesitated, then took a deep breath. "My grandmother, she was part of the Corwin cult." Emma's eyes widened in shock. "What? She was one of Ezekiel's followers," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She escaped before the villagers sealed the caves, but she carried the curse with her, and I think it's still here in this town in our bloodlines." "No," Emma said, shaking her head. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," Sarah insisted. "Your family, Emma, you're connected to this. Daniel's disappearance, the visions you're having, it's all tied to Ezekiel's curse, and I'm afraid you might be the key to breaking it." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with foreboding. Emma's mind raced as she stared at her friend, her thoughts spiraling into a dark, terrifying truth. She wasn't just searching for her brother. She was running out of time to save herself. Animals start disappearing. The air clung to the Appalachian mountains like a damp shroud, heavy with secrets and the faint scent of decay. Emma Carter stood at the edge of the forest, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. The trees, once green and vibrant, now stood as skeletal sentinels, their branches etched against the gray sky like bony fingers. The wind whispered through the leaves, a low, mournful sigh that sent shivers down her spine. Max, her loyal golden retriever, had always been her constant companion. But over the past few days, his behavior had grown increasingly erratic. His once wagging tail now hung low, and his eyes, usually bright and trusting, were clouded with a mixture of fear and aggression. Emma had tried to brush it off as mere anxiety, but deep down she knew something was wrong. The forest seemed to be changing him, as if the very air was poison to his spirit. "Max," Emma called out, her voice echoing through the stillness. She had let him out to explore while she unpacked her bags, but now, as the sun began to rise, there was no sign of him. She walked through the overgrown grass, her boots crunching against the dry underbrush. The ground was littered with leaves, and the faint sound of crickets provided a monotonous backdrop to her growing unease. As she approached the edge of the forest, she noticed something strange. The ground was torn up as if something had clawed at the earth with ferocity. She knelt down, her fingers brushing against the rough soil. The marks were deep, jagged, and unfamiliar. They didn't look like they belonged to any animal she knew. A shiver ran down her spine as she stood, her mind racing. "Max!" she called again, louder this time. The only response was the distant hoot of an owl, its call echoing through the trees like a mournful cry. She walked deeper into the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The trees seemed to close in around her, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made her jump. As she rounded a bend in the path, she saw it. A trail of claw marks, deep and jagged, led into the heart of the forest. They were the same as the ones she had found earlier, but here, they were more pronounced, more deliberate. She followed them, her breath coming in short, nervous gasps. The forest grew darker, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to watch her every move. Suddenly, Emma stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a grotesque arrangement of animal carcasses, their bodies torn and mutilated beyond recognition. The air was thick with the stench of rot, and flies buzzed around the carnage, their incessant hum filling the air. Emma gagged, her hand covering her mouth as she stepped back, her eyes wide with horror. The animals were arranged in a pattern, their bodies forming a twisted rune that seemed to pulse with a dark, malevolent energy. It was the same symbol Daniel had described in his voicemail, the same one she had seen in the visions that haunted her sleep. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. This was no random act of violence. It was a ritual, a twisted sacrifice to something ancient and evil. She turned to run, but her feet felt heavy as if rooted to the spot. The forest seemed to grow quieter, the trees holding their breath in anticipation. The air grew colder, and she could feel a presence watching her, its eyes boring into her skin. She didn't need to see it to know it was there. She could feel it, a dark, ancient power that seeped into her bones and filled her with a primal fear she couldn't explain. And then she heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around her. The sound sent chills down her spine, and she knew she wasn't alone. Whatever was out there was closing in. Emma didn't wait to find out what it was. She turned and ran, her feet pounding against the earth as she desperately tried to put as much distance between herself and the clearing as possible. The forest seemed to shift around her, the trees blurring together as she ran. She could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on her, suffocating her. When she finally emerged from the forest, she was gasping for breath, her heart racing. She leaned against the porch railing of her small cabin, her hands shaking. The clearing was just a few miles away, but it felt like a lifetime ago. She knew she had to find Max, but a part of her was terrified of what she might find. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ground, Emma realized that she wasn't just fighting for her brother. She was fighting for herself, for her sanity, and for the life of the one creature that had always been by her side. The hollowing depths had taken Daniel, and now they had taken Max. But Emma wasn't going to let them take anything else from her without a fight. She walked into the cabin, her resolve hardening with every step. She would find Max, no matter what it took. And if the depths of the earth themselves stood in her way, she would dig her way through them, even if it meant uncovering secrets that were meant to stay buried. The night was young, and the darkness was just beginning to creep in, but Emma was ready. She had faced the horrors of her own mind, and she had survived. Whatever lay in the depths of those caves, she would face it head-on, armed with nothing but her courage and the fading hope that she might still find her brother alive. And as she stood there, the shadows deepening around her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that something was waiting for her to make her next move. The forest held its breath, and the darkness waited patiently, knowing that it would only be a matter of time before she returned. The diary, The cabin was quiet, too quiet. Emma sat at the wooden table, the only sound being the soft hum of the lantern in the corner. Daniel's belongings were scattered around her, his dusty backpack, a water bottle, and a stack of research papers. But it was the small, leather-bound journal that caught her attention. It lay on the edge of the table, as if Daniel had just set it down moments ago. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the cover. It felt cold to the touch, despite the warmth of the cabin. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she knew there was no one there. The journal creaked as she opened it, revealing pages filled with Daniel's messy handwriting. The first few entries were normal. Notes about subterranean ecosystems, sketches of cave formations, and observations about the unique flora and fauna of the hollowing depths. But as she flipped deeper into the journal, the writing became erratic, the words spilling across the page in a frantic scrawl. "They're watching me," one entry read. "I hear them in the walls, whispering my name. I try to ignore it, but it's getting louder. I saw something today, shadowy figures, just out of sight. They don't want me here." Emma's breath caught as she turned the page. The next entry was smeared with something dark, like dried ink or blood. "I found the symbols," Daniel wrote. "They're everywhere, carved into the walls. They glow in the dark. I think they're a warning, but I don't know what they mean. I feel like I'm being pulled deeper into the heart of the caves. I don't know if I can stop myself." The pages after that were torn out, leaving jagged edges and fragments of sentences. "They're inside my head. Can't trust. Must find the source." The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled in red. "I've seen Ezekiel." Emma's hands trembled as she closed the journal. The air in the cabin seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening around her. She glanced at the lantern, its flame flickering as if someone had breathed on it. Outside, the wind howled. The sound was like a mournful whistle that sent shivers down her spine. She opened the journal again, her voice barely above a whisper as she read the last entry aloud. "I've seen Ezekiel." The moment the words left her lips, the lantern flickered once, twice, and then died. The cabin plunged into darkness. Emma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel eyes on her, unseen but undeniable. The wind outside seemed to grow louder, the whistle rising to a scream. She strained to hear anything else, but there was only the oppressive silence of the dark. And then, something moved. At first it was just a faint creak, like the sound of old wood shifting, but then came the unmistakable scrape of something sharp against stone. Emma's breath hitched as the sound grew louder, closer. She fumbled in her pocket for the flashlight Daniel had left behind, her fingers shaking as she turned it on. The weak beam of light illuminated the room, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted on the walls. What she saw made her blood run cold. The shadows themselves seemed to be moving, writhing like livings. They formed shapes, hands, fingers, skeletal and grasping. The scrape grew louder, and Emma realized it was coming from the walls. The shadows were clawing at the wood, their dark forms slashing and tearing as if trying to break free. "Who's there?" Emma demanded, though her voice trembled. There was no answer. Instead, the air grew colder, the shadows deepening until they seemed to press in around her. Emma's breath fogged in front of her, and she could see her own reflection in the flashlight's beam. Her pale face, her wide eyes. And then behind her she saw something else. A shadow. Tall. Impossibly tall. With glowing eyes that reflected the light. It stood just behind her, its presence filling the room with unspeakable evil. Emma spun around, but there was no one there. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but empty space. And yet, the presence remained. The whistle of the wind stopped. The scrape of the shadows ceased. The world held its breath, And in that moment of perfect silence, Emma heard her own voice whisper, "I've seen Ezekiel." She didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't hers. The flashlight flickered once, twice, and then went out. Betrayal. The crackling of the fireplace in Emma's small cabin cast flickering shadows on the walls, making it seem as though the shadows themselves were alive and watching. Emma sat at the wooden table, her hands trembling as she flipped through Daniel's journal. The entries grew more erratic toward the end, filled with sketches of strange symbols and fragmented sentences about voices in the dark. Sarah sat across from her, her face pale in the dim light. "You knew, didn't you?" Emma's voice was steady, but the edge of accusation was sharp. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting toward the fire before settling on Emma's. "I was trying to protect you," she said softly, her words barely audible over the crackle of the flames. "I didn't want you to get hurt." "Protect me? By keeping secrets? By letting Daniel go in there alone?" Emma's voice rose, and the fire seemed to respond, a log shifting with a sharp snap that made both women jump. Before Sarah could reply, a knock echoed through the cabin. It was a heavy, deliberate knock, each thud sounding like a heartbeat in the silence. Max, who had been lying by the fire, growled low in his throat, his hackles raised. Emma stood, her heart pounding in her chest, and made her way to the door. When she opened it, Thomas stood on the porch, his tall frame silhouetted against the dark forest. His charming smile was gone, replaced by something colder, harder. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and menacing. Emma's instincts screamed at her to shut the door, to lock it and never open it again, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. Thomas stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. Sarah stood, her expression unreadable, and for a moment Emma thought she saw something flicker in her friend's eyes. Something dark. Something alien. "You see, Emma," Thomas began, his voice smooth as silk but laced with malice. "I've been waiting a very long time for this moment. You're special, Emma. You come from a long line of very special people." Emma's mind raced. "What are you talking about?" "The Corwin bloodline," Thomas said, stepping closer. "Ezekiel Corwin's blood runs through your veins, and that makes you the key to unlocking the curse." Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Thomas, stop. You're not thinking about what you're doing." "Silence!" Thomas barked, his voice echoing through the small cabin. Sarah flinched, but Emma saw something in her eyes, something like fear, but also something else. Something like obedience. "You used me," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You used Daniel, didn't you?" Thomas laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Daniel was just bait, and you took it hook, line, and sinker. You see, Emma, I've been planting seeds in your mind for weeks. The visions, the voices, the dirt under your fingernails. It was all me, all part of the plan." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" "The cursed artifacts," Thomas said, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small, carved stone, black and twisted. "This little trinket has a way of making people see things, hear things, even feel things. You've been so caught up in your own mind, your own fears, that you didn't even notice." As he spoke, memories flashed through Emma's mind, memories that felt real, but now seemed tainted. The vision of herself at the altar, the dirt under her nails, the whispers in the dark. Had any of it been real? "You're sick," Emma spat, her anger rising. "You're using me, using Daniel, using all of this just for some twisted ritual?" Thomas shrugged. "Call it what you want, but the truth is, Emma, you're the only one who can break the seal. And once that's done, Ezekiel will be free." Before Emma could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her movements strange and jerky, as though she were being pulled by an invisible string. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment they seemed to disappear, replaced by an inky blackness that seemed to suck the light out of the room. "Run," A voice whispered low and guttural, not Sarah's voice at all. It was a voice that sent chills down Emma's spine, a voice that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. Run while you still can. Emma froze, her mind racing. What was happening? Was this another hallucination? Another trick? But before she could process anything, Sarah's body contorted, her back arching unnaturally as she let out a scream that was not her own. It was a sound that made the fire gutter, that made Max howl, a sound that made Emma's blood run cold. And then, in an instant, Sarah was still. Her eyes returned to normal, and she looked at Emma with a mixture of fear and confusion. What just happened? Thomas laughed again, the sound colder than ever. You see, Emma, even your dear friend is part of this. She's been mine all along. As the words left his lips, Sarah's eyes flickered once more, and this time they stayed black. Her voice, when she spoke, was not her own. It's time, Emma. Ezekiel's spirit hissed through Sarah's lips. It's time to finish what was started. Emma backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the air growing thick and heavy. Her mind raced, her schizophrenia spiraling out of control as reality and illusion blurred together. She turned and ran, slamming the door behind her and plunging into the dark, cold night. The forest loomed around her, the trees twisting into monstrous shapes in her mind. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made her jump. She could feel eyes on her, watching her, waiting for her. And in the distance, she heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps following her deeper into the darkness. She ran faster, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But no matter how fast she ran, the footsteps kept pace, echoing in her ears like a countdown to her doom. And then, everything went black. Descent into madness. The air inside the cave was thick and heavy, like a suffocating fog that clung to Emma's skin. Drip, drip, the slow, steady rhythm of water echoing through the caverns seemed to match the erratic pounding of her heart. She fumbled in her backpack for the flashlight Daniel had given her, its weak beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. But even the light couldn't chase away the shadows that seemed to writhe and twist around her. Emma's breath came in short, sharp gasps as she moved deeper into the caves. Her schizophrenia, always a fragile thread, was beginning to unravel. Voices whispered in her ears, not the soothing tones of her brother or the sharp warnings of Sarah, but low, guttural growls that seemed to come from all directions. They called her name, their voices echoing off the cold stone walls. Emma, Emma, Emma. The sound sent shivers crawling up her spine. She pressed her hands against her ears, but the voices only grew louder, more insistent. Her mind, already fragile, teetered on the edge of control. Was this real? Or was it just another hallucination? She couldn't tell. The line between reality and illusion was blurring, and she was powerless to stop it. Far ahead, she saw it, a flickering light, dim and eerie, casting long, twisting shadows on the walls. It was a torch, held by a figure standing in the center of a large, cavernous space. Emma froze, her blood running cold as she recognized the man holding it. It was Thomas, his once charming smile now twisted into a cruel grin. "Welcome, Emma," he said, his voice echoing through the vast space. "You're right on time." As she stepped closer, the ground beneath her feet crunched with a disturbing crackle of gravel and bones. Something was wrong. The air smelled of decay, and the faint scent of blood lingered, making her stomach twist with nausea. Before her lay a massive ancient symbol, etched into the stone floor in a substance that looked horribly like dried blood. It glowed faintly, casting an otherworldly light over the cavern. "What is this place?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "This is where it all began," Thomas replied, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural intensity. "And this is where it will end. Suddenly, a familiar growl echoed through the cave. Max, her loyal dog, emerged from the shadows, his fur matted and streaked with dirt. But he wasn't the same. His eyes were wild, almost feral, and his teeth were bared in a snarl. He lunged at Thomas, but the historian didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a hand, and Max froze midair as if an invisible force had grabbed hold of him. "No!" Emma screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. "Let him go." Thomas laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent chills down her spine. "You really think you can stop this, Emma? You've been part of this from the beginning." As he spoke, the voices in her head grew louder, more urgent. They were screaming now, a cacophony of fear and anger that threatened to consume her. She gripped her head, her knees trembling as the world around her seemed to spin out of control. And then, everything went black. When Emma came to, she was lying on the cold stone floor, her head pounding and her vision blurry. The torch Thomas had been holding was now lying on the ground, its flame flickering weakly. Max was nowhere to be seen, but she could hear his faint whimpers somewhere in the distance. "Max!" she called out, her voice shaking. "Where are you?" There was no answer. Instead, Thomas' voice echoed through the cavern once more. "You see, Emma, you've always been part of this. Your family, your bloodline, it's tied to this curse. Ezekiel Corwin was your ancestor, and now it's time to finish what he started." Emma's mind reeled. "No, that's not true." "It is," Thomas said, stepping closer. "And now, you're going to help me bring him back." As he spoke, the symbol on the ground began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light over the cavern. The air grew colder, the shadows twisting into shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. Emma could feel a presence around her, something ancient and evil, watching her every move. Suddenly, Max appeared again, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He lunged at Thomas, but this time, it wasn't just an attack. It was a desperate attempt to save her. Thomas fell to the ground, the torch rolling away as the two struggled. Emma didn't hesitate. Grabbing the flashlight, she swung it with all her might, shattering it against Thomas's skull. He let out a sickening crack as the flashlight connected, and then silence. But the relief was short-lived. As Emma turned to run, she heard a faint whisper in her ear. "You'll never escape." It wasn't Thomas's voice, it was Daniel's. She spun around, her heart racing. "Daniel? Is that you?" But there was no answer. Instead, the ground beneath her feet began to shake, and the symbol on the floor glowed brighter, filling the cavern with an ominous light. The voices in her head were screaming now, their words indistinguishable but their fear and anger clear. Emma knew she had to get out, fast. She turned and ran, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the cavern as she desperately sought the exit. But with every step, the voices grew louder, the shadows closing around her. And then, everything went black again. This time, when Emma came to, she was lying outside the cave, the cool night air hitting her like a slap in the face. Max was by her side, his fur matted but his eyes clear once more. The forest around them was quiet, the only sound the distant hoot-hoot of an owl and the occasional snap of a twig breaking in the wind. But as she sat up, her hands trembling and her mind still racing, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The darkness inside the cave seemed to linger, a shadow on the edge of her vision. And deep down she knew that this wasn't over. The curse was still out there, waiting, and one day it would come for her again. Final confrontation. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something far more sinister, burnt ash and decay. Emma's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the jagged walls of the cave as she descended deeper into its belly. The sound of dripping water echoed through the cavern, a steady drip-drip that seemed to match the pounding of her heart. In her hands, Daniel's journal felt heavier than usual, its pages filled with cryptic notes and symbols that now made sense to her. She had uncovered the truth. Ezekiel's spirit had been awakened, and she was the key to his full resurrection. Emma's breath came into shallow gasps as she approached the heart of the cave, a vast chamber illuminated by an unnatural flickering glow. In the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, its surface etched with the same runes Daniel had described in his voicemail. Around it lay a circle of ash, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Thomas stood beside the altar, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Beside him, Sarah, now completely under Ezekiel's control, watched Emma with cold, empty eyes. "You're just in time for the main event," Thomas said, his voice dripping with malice. "Ezekiel's been waiting for you." Emma tightened her grip on the journal. "I won't let you do this," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Thomas chuckled, the sound echoing ominously off the cave wall. "You don't have a choice. You're part of this, Emma, part of his bloodline, and now you're going to help me bring him back." Behind him, Sarah stepped forward, her movements stiff and unnatural. "It's too late," she said, her voice no longer her own. "The ritual is almost complete." Emma's mind raced. She had to stop them, but how? Her schizophrenia made it hard to trust her own senses, and the shadows around her seemed to shift and twist as if alive. But she knew what she had to do. Flipping through the journal, she found the page Daniel had marked. A counter-ritual, a way to seal the portal permanently. It would cost her everything, but she was willing to pay the price. "I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else," Emma said, her voice firm. She began to read the words aloud, her voice echoing off the walls. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the air grew colder, the drip-drip of water replaced by a low, ominous hum. Thomas's face twisted in rage. "No!" he screamed, lunging at her. But it was too late. The words of the counter-ritual had been spoken, and a blinding light filled the chamber. The runes on the walls began to glow brighter, and the air seemed to tear apart, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled in two. Emma felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in years, her mind was clear, the shadows and voices gone. She looked down at her hands and saw that they were beginning to fade, her body dissolving into ash as the light consumed her. "Emma!" Max's desperate bark cut through the chaos. The dog had found his way back, his fur matted with dirt and blood, but alive. He leapt at Thomas, teeth bared, giving Emma just enough time to finish the ritual. As the light reached its peak, Ezekiel's scream echoed through the cave, a sound that was both ancient and evil. The chamber began to collapse, rocks falling from the ceiling as the ground shuddered violently. Thomas and Sarah were swallowed by the chaos, their fate unknown. And then, everything was still. The legacy lives on. Months later, the town of Blackwood Hollow was quiet once again. The gates had been sealed, buried under tons of rubble, and the locals whispered that the curse had finally been broken. But deep in the earth, something stirred, a faint whisper, a shadow in the dark. Sarah sat in her small cottage, the fire crackling in the hearth. She had inherited Daniel's research, and though she had vowed to keep its secrets buried, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every now and then she swore she heard faint whispers in the night, a soft voice calling her name. She turned to the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. "No," she said aloud, though she wasn't sure who she was talking to. "I won't let it happen again." But as she spoke, the wind outside seemed to carry a single word. "Sarah." And in the darkness, something smiled. The song that was never his. Music is supposed to be timeless. Songs get passed down, replayed and covered, but their origins don't change. And at least that's what I used to believe. Then I found the record. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when I stumbled into an old record store buried deep in the heart of the city. The store was a labyrinth of dusty shelves and forgotten vinyl, the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. I had wandered in out of curiosity, my fingers brushing against the spines of the records as I scanned the titles. Most were familiar, classics by the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and a few jazz albums. But then, buried in a box labeled Miscellaneous, I found it. The cover was strange. It showed a faded photograph of Bob Marley, his familiar dreadlocks and kind smile. But the title beneath the image sent a shiver down my spine. Bob Marley, don't worry, be happy. My stomach twisted. That was wrong. Everyone thought Bob Marley sang that song, but it was actually Bobby McFerrin. Everyone knew that. I had heard the upbeat, whistling tune 1,000 times before, but it was Bobby's voice that brought it to life, not Bob's. I picked up the record and my hands felt ice cold. The vinyl was heavier than it should have been, and there was an odd, almost greasy texture to it. I took it to the cashier, an old man with hollow eyes who barely looked up as I asked, "Where did this come from?" He didn't answer, just shook his head. I bought it anyway. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the record clutched in my hands. My roommate Sarah was out visiting her family, so the place was quiet. The only sound, the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I placed the record on my old turntable, hesitated for a moment, and then dropped the needle. The familiar tune began, the soft, whistling melody filling the room. But something was off. The voice singing wasn't Bobby McFerrin's. It wasn't Bob Marley's either. It was something else. Something wrong. The notes sounded distorted, stretched unnatural, like a voice trying to mimic a human but failing. It was deep and gravelly with a strange echo that seemed to reverberate in my chest. My skin crawled as the words played on, but they didn't sound like the carefree lyrics I knew. They sounded darker. "And everything will be all right," the voice growled, but it didn't feel all right. Just as I reached to lift the needle, the music stopped on its own. The silence was sudden, oppressive. Then, a low, crackling whisper slithered through the speakers. "You remember wrong." I turned off the record player, my hands shaking. The room felt colder now, as if something had shifted in the air. And then, from outside my window in the quiet of the night, I heard someone whistling. The same tune. Slow, deliberate, closer. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The whistling grew louder and I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. It sounded like someone was standing right outside my window. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No one answered. The whistling stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The record had unsettled me, but I tried to brush it off as my imagination. Maybe it was just a prank, a fake record someone had made as a joke. But the memory of that voice lingered, and the way the music had seemed to twist and writhe in my ears. One night, I decided to research online. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had found a strange version of the song. I typed "Don't Worry, Be Happy" Bob Marley version into the search bar, and a flurry of results appeared. Most were articles debunking the common misconception that Bob Marley sang the song, explaining that it was actually Bobby McFerrin. But then, buried deep in the search results, I found a forum. It was called the Mandela Effect Forum, a place where people shared experiences of things they remembered differently than what history recorded. I clicked on a thread titled "The Marley Version." Dozens of people had commented, sharing their own stories of hearing Bob Marley sing "Don't Worry, Be Happy." Some claimed to have owned the record as kids, only to have it disappear later. Others spoke of hearing the song on the radio, only to be told by friends and family that they were mistaken. One user, named Noah88, wrote, "You're not crazy. I remember the other song. I remember it so clearly. But now it's gone." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. I wasn't alone. The next morning, the forum was gone. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to dig deeper. I spent hours scouring the internet, searching for any mention of the mysterious record, or the strange version of the song. And then one night I found a name, Marcus Blackwood, an underground record collector who claimed to have the lost version of Don't Worry, Be Happy. I sent him a message, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet me. But there was a condition. I had to come alone, and I had to meet him at an abandoned bar on the outskirts of the city. The bar was a crumbling brick building, its windows shattered, and its sign hanging crookedly from a rusted frame. I hesitated outside, wondering if I should turn back. But something compelled me to go inside. The bar was dark, the air thick with dust and the smell of rot. Marcus was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He was a tall, gaunt man with sunken eyes and skin that seemed too pale. "So, you're looking for the truth," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I just want to know why this record exists," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, a thin, mirthless smile. "You want to know why? Because some songs weren't meant to be sung by the living." He handed me a cassette tape. On the label, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "Be Happy, 1982. I took it home, my heart racing. That night I played the cassette. The song began, familiar but different. The melody was slower, darker, and the lyrics seemed to shift halfway through. "Be happy, you belong to me now," the voice sang. I froze. Those weren't the words I knew. The tape stopped itself, the abrupt silence jarring. The next day, I decided to investigate further. I visited a local music archive, searching for any records of an early version of Don't Worry, Be Happy. What I found shocked me. There was a record of the song being composed in 1982, but the composer's name was missing. It was as if the artist had been erased from history. That night, I played the vinyl again, determined to uncover the truth. This time, I slowed it down to half speed. Beneath the music, there was a low voice speaking. "He sang it first," it said. "He wants it back." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I woke up to find my record collection changed. Every version of Don't Worry, Be Happy now credited Bob Marley. Online, Bobby McFerrin's Wikipedia page was gone. And then, as I sat in my apartment, I heard it again, the whistling. It was inside the room this time. I spun around, but I was alone. The last thing I heard before the lights cut out was a voice humming the song. And then, nothing. They found my apartment empty, the record still spinning on the turntable. But I was gone. And if you ever hear the song, remember this: some truths are better left forgotten. The wrong record. The sun had just set, casting a golden hue over the small town when I decided to visit the old record store. It was a place I often frequented, not just for the music, but for the comfort it offered, a refuge from the chaos of daily life. The store was nestled between a vintage clothing shop and a used bookstore, its wooden sign creaking in the gentle evening breeze. The smell of aged vinyl and dust greeted me as I pushed open the door, the bell above it ringing softly. I wove through the crowded aisles, my fingers brushing over the spines of the records. The store was a treasure trove, each album telling a story of its own. My eyes landed on a box labeled Miscellaneous in the corner, and I knelt down to explore. As I sifted through the records, one caught my eye, a faded photograph of Bob Marley. But the title read, "Don't Worry, Be Happy." My heart skipped a beat. That was Bobby McFerrin's song, not Marley's. I turned the record over, feeling an unexpected chill in my fingers. It was ice cold, despite the warmth of the evening. Confusion settled in as I stood and approached the counter. The store clerk, an older man with sunken eyes and pale skin, looked up from his newspaper. "Where did this come from?" I asked, holding up the record. He didn't flinch, his gaze returning to the paper without a word. "Mister, I need to know. This seems off," I pressed. Still, He remained silent, his silence unnerving. I hesitated, glancing at the door. Something felt wrong, but my curiosity won over. I handed him the money and left with the record clutched tightly in my hand. The walk home was short, but each step felt heavy, as if I was carrying something I shouldn't. Back in my apartment, I placed the record on my player, the needle crackling as it dropped. The familiar tune began, but it was different. The voice wasn't Bobby's. It wasn't Bob's either. It was warped, stretching unnaturally, like a shadow mimicking a man. I reached to stop it, but before I could, the music halted abruptly. A low whisper, like static, filled the room. "You remember wrong." My heart raced as I turned off the player, the room suddenly too quiet. The knock on the door made me jump. It was my friend, Alex, who had stopped by to study. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my pale face. I forced a laugh, attributing it to fatigue, but the whisper echoed in my mind. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling. The song played in my head, different each time, the voice changing. I tried to focus on my breathing, but my thoughts spiraled. Had I imagined the whisper? Or was it real? The line between reality and paranoia blurred, a familiar struggle since my anxiety began. The next morning, I met Alex at a cafe. She listened as I recounted the strange events, her skepticism evident. "Maybe it's just an old record," she suggested. But I knew what I heard, and the coldness of the vinyl lingered in my memory. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to dig deeper. My research led me to forums discussing the Mandela Effect, where people shared memories of the song being Marley's. One user, Norius88, claimed to remember it differently, giving me hope I wasn't alone. But the forum vanished the next day, leaving me more confused. The record store clerk's silence haunted me. What did he know? And why was the record so cold? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had unearthed something meant to remain buried, something tied to darker forces. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. As night fell, I found myself standing outside the record store again. The sign creaked ominously, the window dark. I pushed open the door, the bell ringing once more. The store was empty, the record seemingly watching me. I approached the counter, determination fueling my steps. The clerk was nowhere to be seen, but a note lay on the counter. Look closer. I left with more questions, the record clutched tightly in my hand. The song echoed in my mind, the whisper lingering. I knew then that this was just the beginning, a chapter in a story I was yet to fully understand. And with that, I stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The song that shouldn't exist. The dim light of my apartment cast long shadows on the walls as I placed the needle on the record. The crackle of static filled the air, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort. But tonight, it felt ominous. The record sleeve, with Bob Marley's faded image, lay on the table, a constant reminder of the mystery. As the first notes of "Don't Worry, Be Happy" played, a sense of relief washed over me. It was the tune I knew, the same melody that had been a backdrop to countless memories. But as the vocals began, my relief turned to dread. The voice wasn't Bobby McFerrin's cheerful tones, nor was it Bob Marley's iconic rasp. It was something else, distorted, gravelly, and otherworldly, like a voice trying to mimic humanity but failing miserably. I sat there, frozen, as the lyrics seemed to drag on, each syllable stretched unnaturally. The record player's speakers buzzed with a low, ominous hum that wasn't part of the song. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Maybe it was a prank, a remix gone wrong? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. This was something darker. As the song reached its midpoint, the music suddenly cut off, leaving an oppressive silence. Then a low, crackling whisper slid through the speakers, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. "You remember wrong," it hissed, the words echoing in the stillness of my apartment. I jerked back, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand trembled as I reached to lift the needle, but before I could, the record player switched off on its own. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the sound. I sat there, breathless, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch, but I knew better. That's when I heard it. Outside my window in the quiet of the night came a slow, deliberate whistle. The same tune. It started softly, then grew louder, closer. My blood ran cold. I told myself it was just someone walking by, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The whistling was too precise, too intentional. It was coming from right outside my window. I didn't dare look. Instead, I grabbed my phone and sent a hasty text to my brother Jake, who lived just a few blocks away. He was always the skeptic, the one who rolled his eyes at my love for conspiracy theories. But right now, I needed him. "Come over," I typed. "Something's wrong." The response came quickly. "What's going on?" he asked, but I didn't reply. I just sat there, my eyes fixed on the window, waiting for the sound to come again. It didn't. Instead, there was a knock at the door. It was light, hesitant, but enough to make me jump. "Hey," Jake said when I opened the door, his voice calm but laced with concern. "What's going on?" He glanced at the record player, still sitting in the middle of the room. "I found this record," I began, trying to explain. "It's supposed to be Bob Marley's version of Don't Worry, Be Happy. But when I played it, it wasn't right." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean it's a cover or something?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not a cover, it's wrong. The voice, the music, it's all off. And then there was this whisper and the whistling outside." Jake's expression softened. "Maybe you're just spooked," he suggested. "You've been stressed lately. Maybe it's playing tricks on your mind." But I knew what I heard. And as we stood there, the silence between us grew heavier. Then, without warning, the record player clicked back on. The same distorted voice filled the room, singing the same warped lyrics. Jake's eyes widened as he stared at the player. "What the hell?" he muttered, taking a step back. I didn't answer. I just grabbed the needle and lifted it, the vinyl spinning lazily under my touch. The room fell silent again, but this time, the stillness felt more oppressive than ever. "You think it's haunted?" Jake asked, his voice lower now. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think there's something wrong with this record. Something not right?" Jake nodded slowly. "Okay, let's look into it. There has to be an explanation." I agreed, but as we started to research, the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, the air colder. And then the whistling started again, closer this time. It wasn't just outside my window, it was right outside my door. Jake's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw fear there. "What do we do?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as the whistling grew louder, more insistent. It was coming for us, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The lost footage. The dim glow of the computer screen cast long shadows across the room as I hunched over my desk, fingers flying across the keyboard. My search for answers led me to a dusty corner of the internet, an old interview from the late 1980s. The video was grainy, but I could make out Bobby McFerrin sitting in a cozy room, surrounded by instruments. The interviewer's voice crackled with static as he posed the question. "Bobby, there's a lot of confusion out there. Why do so many people think Bob Marley sang, 'Don't worry, be happy'?" I leaned in, eager for answers, but as the video began to play, it jolted and skipped. The screen flickered, and Bobby's face warped, stretching unnaturally. Colors bled together in a chaotic mess, and a low, guttural hum filled the speakers. I winced, reaching to turn down the volume, but before I could, the chaos ended. The screen froze on a single frame, Bob Marley staring directly at the camera, his eyes inky black and wide with an intensity that made my breath hitch. A shiver ran down my spine as I slammed the laptop shut. The room felt colder, and I could swear I heard a faint whisper of the song drifting from nowhere. My cat, Luna, who had been sleeping at my feet, stood up abruptly, her ears perked and twitching as if she sensed it too. I pushed my chair back, trying to shake off the unease, but my mind raced. Why was this happening? I grabbed my phone, texting my sister, Miyadashi. She was always the skeptic, but she was also my go-to for things beyond the ordinary. Hey, you need to see this, I typed, attaching the link. She replied almost instantly. What's up? You know I'm studying. Just watch it, I urged. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. That's messed up. Where did you find this? Some old interview. But why does it look like that? No idea, but maybe it's just a bad upload. Don't freak yourself out. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one who'd found that creepy record. I decided to dig deeper, scrolling through forums where people discussed similar experiences. That's when I stumbled upon a name, Elena, a local who claimed to know about the song's dark history. She mentioned something about a curse and offered to meet at an old cafe on the outskirts of town. The next evening I sat at a corner table nursing a coffee. The cafe was quiet, the only sound the occasional clink of dishes. Then the door creaked open, and a woman with silver hair and piercing green eyes walked in. She had an air of calm, carrying a small bag adorned with symbols that glowed faintly under the cafe lights. You're the one who's been asking questions, she said, her voice steady. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. What do you know about the song? She leaned forward, her voice low. It's tied to something ancient, a curse created with black magic. The record you found is just the surface. There's more to it. I swallowed hard. What more? Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. The lights flickered, and the air grew thick with an unnatural silence. Elena's eyes locked onto something behind me, and I turned to see a shadowy figure looming near the door. Time's up, she whispered, grabbing my hand. We need to leave. Now. As we hurried out, the night air felt heavy, and the song's melody played in my mind louder than ever. I knew then I was in too deep, and the truth was more terrifying than I'd ever imagined. The whistling in the dark. The night air was thick and heavy, the kind of stillness that made you feel like you were breathing through a wet sponge. I sat in my dimly lit apartment, the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the occasional hiss of a passing car outside the only sounds breaking the silence. But then there it was, whistling. At first it was faint, so faint I wondered if I was imagining it. But as the seconds ticked by, the melody grew louder, clearer, and unmistakable. Don't worry, be happy. My stomach twisted into knots. Earlier that day, I'd found that strange record, played it, and heard something that couldn't be explained. Now here was the same song, but this time, it wasn't coming from a record. It was coming from outside my window. I froze, my hands gripping the arms of my chair like a lifeline. The whistling was slow, deliberate, each note stretching out longer than it should. It wasn't the cheerful, upbeat tune I was used to. This was wrong. It felt like someone was taking their time, savoring each note, drawing it out with a sinister intent. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling. I didn't mean to shout, but the words escaped before I could stop them. The whistling didn't stop. It didn't even pause. It just kept going, moving closer with each passing second. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, and took a step toward the window. The curtains were closed, but I could feel a draft brushing against them, as if something was standing just on the other side, pressing against the fabric. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drumline. And then the whistling stopped. The silence was worse. For a moment there was nothing. No wind, no cars, no distant hum of the city. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that feels alive, the kind that makes you wonder if you're truly alone. But I wasn't alone. A low, guttural chuckle seeped through the closed window, the sound gravelly and unnatural. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I forced myself to move, to take a step back, to get away from the window. But my feet felt heavy as if they were glued to the spot. The chuckle grew louder, closer, and I could feel a presence pressing against the other side of the glass, something cold and unseen. And then, the whistling started again. This time, it was right outside my window. I turned and ran, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor as I bolted toward the bedroom. I slammed the door, shut behind me and leaned against it, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. My hands were shaking, my palms slick with sweat. It was just a prank, I told myself. Someone was playing a sick joke. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Whatever was on the other side of that window wasn't human. And it wasn't just whistling for fun. It was coming for me. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers fumbling with the screen as I tried to call for help. But as I scrolled through my contacts, I noticed something odd. The screen was flickering, the colors distorting as if something was interfering with the signal. A low, crackling static filled the speakers, and then, for just a split second, I heard a voice. "You remember wrong." I dropped the phone, my heart racing. The words were the same ones I'd heard on the record earlier that day, but this time they weren't coming from a dusty old vinyl. They were coming from my phone. I picked it up again, my hands trembling. The screen was normal now, the static gone. I quickly dialed my best friend Sarah, my fingers moving on autopilot. The phone rang once, twice, and then her voice came through, warm and reassuring. "Hey, what's up? It's kinda late," she said, her tone light. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Something's wrong. There's someone outside my window. They're whistling that song. And I think it's connected to that record I found earlier." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy silence that stretched out for what felt like an eternity. "Who is this?" Sarah's voice was cold, unfamiliar. "What? It's me. What are you talking about?" "No one's there," she said, her tone flat. "This number is disconnected." And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind racing. What was happening? Why was Sarah acting like she didn't know me? And how did she know the number was disconnected when she just answered it? Before I could process any of it, the whistling started again. This time it wasn't just outside my window. It was inside my apartment. I spun around, my eyes scanning the darkened room, but there was nothing there. The sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, echoing off the walls, filling the space with an oppressive, suffocating weight. And then, the lights went out. Plunged into darkness, I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The whistling stopped, replaced by a heavy, deliberate breathing sound like something was standing in the shadows, watching me. It wasn't a human sound. It was deep, guttural, the kind of sound that made you think of damp caves and rotting earth. Slowly, I backed away from the door, my hands outstretched in front of me like a blind person feeling their way through the dark. My fingers brushed against the bedpost and I grabbed onto it, holding it like a lifeline. The breathing grew louder, closer. I could feel it now, a warm, rank breath on the back of my neck. Something was right behind me. I turned, my hand flailing out, but there was nothing there. The breathing stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. And then the lights flickered back on. The room was empty. The window was closed. Everything was perfectly still. But on my nightstand, next to my phone, was a small piece of paper. It wasn't there before. I picked it up, my hands shaking as I unfolded it. Scrawled in red ink, the words read, "You remember wrong," and beneath them a single name, Bobby. The room seemed to spin around me as I stared at the paper. Bobby McFerrin, the man who actually sang "Don't Worry, Be Happy," was nowhere to be found. His name was disappearing, erased from history, and I was the only one who seemed to remember him. But now something was here, in my apartment, watching me, waiting for me. And it had a name. The Mandela Effect Forum. The glow of the computer screen cast long shadows in the dimly lit room, where the protagonist sat hunched over, fingers flying across the keyboard. The hum of the old desktop and the occasional creak of the wooden floor provided an eerie background symphony. They had been searching for answers for hours, fueled by a growing sense of unease and curiosity. The discovery of the vinyl record had opened a Pandora's box, and now they were determined to uncover the truth. Scrolling through a labyrinth of online forums, the protagonist stumbled upon a thread titled The Marley Version. The words seemed to leap off the screen, drawing them in with an almost magnetic pull. The posts were filled with comments from users who swore they remembered Bob Marley singing, "Don't worry, be happy, not Bobby McFerrin." Some even claimed to have owned the record, only to have it vanished mysteriously. The protagonist's heart raced as they realized they weren't alone in this bizarre phenomena. Among the countless comments, one caught their eye. A user named Norius88 wrote, "You're not crazy. I remember the other song. It wasn't just the voice. The lyrics were different, darker. But every time I try to find it, it's gone. Be careful. You're not the only one looking." The words sent a chill down their spine, but it was the following sentence that made their breath hitch. "They're listening." Intrigued and unsettled, the protagonist decided to create an account and reach out to Noah Worry88. The username seemed ominous, yet there was a sense of camaraderie in the shared experience. As they typed their message, the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was thickening. The clock on the wall ticked louder, each second marking the passage of time with a relentless rhythm. The next morning, the protagonist woke to an empty, hollow feeling. They rushed to the computer, their fingers trembling as they navigated back to the forum. But where there once was a bustling community discussing the mysterious record, there was now only an error message, page not found. It was as if the forum had never existed. Confusion and a dawning sense of dread settled in. The protagonist's mind raced, questioning their own sanity. Had they imagined the entire exchange? The thought sent a wave of nausea through them, but the memory of Norius88's words was vivid, etched into their mind like a scar. As the day progressed, the weight of isolation pressed down on them. Friends and family were skeptical, dismissing their story with a wave of the hand. "You're just stressed," they said. But the protagonist knew what they had seen, what they had felt. The record, the forum, the whisper in the night, it all pointed to something far more sinister. That evening, as the protagonist sat in the dim light, the silence was oppressive. The vinyl record lay on the table, its edge catching the faint light and casting an eerie shadow. Without thinking, they reached for it, the cold surface meeting their fingertips. The room seemed to hold its breath as they placed the needle on the record. The familiar melody began, but it was warped, distorted. The voice, once cheerful, now sounded menacing, echoing in the room like a haunting specter. The protagonist's heart pounded, each beat synchronized with the music's rhythm. Halfway through, the song jarringly stopped, replaced by a low, crackling whisper. "You remember rock." The words sent a shiver down their spine. The room felt alive, the shadows twisting into menacing forms. The protagonist's breath came in short gasps as they fumbled to turn off the record player. The sudden silence was almost deafening, punctuated only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. But then outside, a whistling began. Slow, deliberate, it echoed the tune of the song. The sound was close, too close, and it was moving. The protagonist's blood ran cold as they approached the window, pulling back the curtain with a trembling hand. The night was dark, but the whistling was unmistakable. It was coming from just beyond the fence, the sound weaving through the air like a snake slithering through grass. The protagonist's mind raced, their thoughts a jumble of fear and confusion. They knew then that this was no ordinary record, no simple case of mistaken memory. This was something deeper, darker, a force that had awakened and would not rest until it claimed what it sought. As the whistling grew louder, the protagonist felt the weight of the unknown pressing down. The record, the forum, the whispers in the night, it all led to one terrifying truth. They were not alone, and the darkness was closing in. The vinyl, once a simple relic of music, had become a gateway to a horror beyond comprehension, a reminder that some truths are better left unremembered. The hidden recording. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, casting a dark shadow over the abandoned bar on the outskirts of town. The sign creaked in the wind, reading the Melody Lounge in faded letters. The once vibrant bar now stood as a relic, its windows shattered, and its door hanging crookedly on hinges that seemed to groan with each gust of wind. I pulled my coat tighter, the chill of the night biting at my skin. The directions from the underground collector had been vague, but the promise of the lost version of Don't Worry, Be Happy was too enticing to ignore. The gravel parking lot was empty, save for a single rusty van parked near the entrance. I hesitated, the memory of the distorted vinyl records fresh in my mind, but my curiosity propelled me forward. The bar's door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty space. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of whiskey. Cobwebs clung to the stools, and the bar itself was cracked, its surface worn. A faint light flickered from the back, casting long shadows across the room. "Welcome," a voice murmured low and gravelly. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. He was tall, with gaunt features and sunken eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. His hair was graying, and his hands were covered in calloused fingers, each adorned with rings that glinted in the dim light. "You're the collector," I stated, though it was more of a question. He nodded, his movements slow and deliberate, as if every gesture was carefully considered. "I have what you're looking for," he said, his voice dripping with an otherworldly calmness. He reached into his coat and produced a cassette tape, its surface scratched and faded. The label read "Be Happy," 1982 in handwriting that was almost illegible. I took it, feeling an unexpected chill run through my fingers. The tape was cold, heavier than it should be, as if it held a weight beyond the physical. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The collector's smile was thin, his lips curling up slightly. "From someone who shouldn't have had it," he replied, his tone enigmatic. "But you know how these things are. Some songs are meant to stay buried." I nodded, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. There was something unsettling about him, something that made me question if I should trust him. But the tape felt important, like a key to a door I desperately needed to open. As I turned to leave, I noticed a photograph on the table beside him. It was an old Polaroid, its edges torn and worn. In it, a group of people stood in a recording studio, their faces blurred except for one figure in the center. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing to the figure. The collector's expression darkened, and he quickly pocketed the photo. "No one you need to worry about," he said, his sharp tone. "Just be careful with that tape. Not everyone who listens to it walks away unscathed." I left the bar with more questions than answers, the cassette clutched tightly in my hand. The night felt heavier now, the silence oppressive. As I walked back to my car, I heard a distant whisper, a soft whistling that sent a shiver down my spine. It was the tune of "Don't Worry, Be Happy," slow and deliberate, echoing through the empty streets. That night, I played the tape. The hissing static filled my room, and then the familiar melody began. But it was different, the notes distorted, the voice deeper, almost inhuman. Halfway through, the lyrics shifted, becoming something far more sinister. "Be happy, you belong to me now." The tape stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence. I sat there, frozen, as the reality of what I had uncovered began to sink in. This song was more than just a melody. It was a key to something darker, something that shouldn't exist. As I rewound the tape, a faint whisper echoed through the speakers, a voice that sent chills down my spine. He sang it first. He wants it back. I knew then that I had to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind this cursed song. No matter how dangerous it might be, the journey ahead was fraught with unknowns, but I was determined to see it through. The song's secrets were buried deep, and I was ready to face whatever horrors lay within. The cassette that should not play. The abandoned bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old whiskey and dust. I sat across from the collector, a man named Marcus, whose face was shadowed under a tattered fedora. The cassette tape he handed me felt heavier than it should, the plastic case creaking as I turned it over in my hands. The label read, "BB Happy, 1982, in faded red ink ori. Something about it felt wrong, like holding a relic that didn't belong in this world. "Play it," Marcus said, his voice low and gravelly. "But don't say I didn't warn you." I hesitated, my fingers trembling slightly as I pushed the cassette into my old boombox. The machine whirred to life, and for a moment there was only static, sharp, crackling bursts that made me wince. Then a familiar melody of "Don't Worry, Be Happy" began to play. But it wasn't the upbeat, carefree version I knew. This was slower, the tempo dragged down like a heavy chain. The whistling was gone, replaced by a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my chest. The voice that sang wasn't Bobby McFerrin's. It wasn't even human. It was deep, resonant, and it seemed to stretch the words like rubber. The lyrics started off the same. "Don't worry, be happy. Every little thing's gonna be alright." But halfway through, they shifted. The words warped into something else, something sinister. "Be happy. You belong to me now. Every little thing, I'll make you see how. Your worries, your fears, your joy, your light. They're all mine now. They're all mine tonight." And a chill ran down my spine as the words echoed in my mind. My sister, Claire, used to sing this song all the time when we were kids. She'd whistle it while she did her homework, her voice bright and cheerful. But this version, it wasn't cheerful. It felt like a trap, a spell woven into the music. I reached to stop the tape, brushing my fingers on the buttons. But before I could press anything, the music stopped on its own. The static returned, sharper now, cutting through the silence like a knife. Then, a voice spoke, low, gravelly and distorted, as if it were being dragged from some deep, buried place. "You shouldn't have come here," it growled. "You shouldn't have listened." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The voice seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls of the bar. Marcus didn't move, his eyes fixed on something across the room that I couldn't see. "You remember wrong," the voice continued. "You always have." Suddenly the tape whirred to life again, the song restarting at full volume. The distortions were worse this time, the notes bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. My hands were shaking, but I managed to press the stop button. The machine fell silent, and for a moment there was nothing but the heavy, oppressive quiet of the bar. Then I heard it, a faint metallic scratching sound like fingernails on chalkboard. It was coming from the boombox. I leaned in closer, my heart pounding as the scratching grew louder, more frantic. The plastic case of the cassette began to warp, bubbling outward like molten wax. "Get out!" Marcus barked, grabbing my arm and yanking me to my feet. "Get out now. You don't want to see what happens next." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my things and ran, the scratching sound echoing behind me as I fled the bar. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, the door locked and bolted behind me. My hands were still shaking, my mind racing. But as I sat there, trying to catch my breath, I realized something. The voice on the tape, it had sounded familiar. It wasn't just the song that was wrong. It was the voice. And now I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd heard it before. Somewhere else. Somewhere close. Like in my own home. The name that disappeared. The air in the music archives was thick with dust and the faint scent of aged paper. Shelves upon shelves of records, CDs, and files stretched toward the ceiling, each one a piece of musical history. But I wasn't here for the classics or the hits. I was here for a ghost. I sat at a wooden table, flipping through a stack of yellowed files. The fluorescent lights above flickered softly, casting an eerie glow over the room. My fingers brushed against the edge of a folder labeled 1988. I pulled it out, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the year Bobby McFerrin released Don't Worry, Be Happy. The song that everyone knew, the song that everyone remembered. I opened the folder and a faint crackling sound filled the air as the pages shifted. Inside were reviews, interviews, and production notes. But as I flipped deeper into the file, something caught my eye. A photocopy of a record label. The title read, Don't Worry, Be Happy. But beneath it, instead of Bobby McFerrin's name, there was nothing. No credits, no songwriter, no producer. Just blank space. My breath hit. I turned the page, expecting to find some kind of explanation. But the next page was more of the same interviews with Bobby McFerrin, where he talked about his inspiration for the song, his hopes for its success. But there was no mention of who actually wrote it. No mention of who sang it first. I pulled out my phone and opened the browser. Typing in a search for Don't Worry, Be Happy original songwriter, I waited for the results to be loaded. But as the page loaded, I noticed something strange. The usual Wikipedia page for the song wasn't there. Instead, there was a message that read, Page not found. I frowned and tried again. This time, I added 1982 to the search, hoping to find something about the earlier version I had heard on the cassette. The results were sparse, but one link caught my eye. It was an archive of a music magazine from 1982, and the headline read, Mystery Surrounds New Hit Single. I clicked on the link and the article loaded slowly. The text was scanned and blurry, but I could make out the words. A new song has taken the world by storm, but no one seems to know who sang it first. Don't Worry, Be Happy has been credited to several artists, but sources close to the music industry claim that the original version was recorded by a lesser-known artist who has since disappeared from public records. Disappeared? I felt a chill running down my spine. I kept reading, but the article ended abruptly. There were no more details, no names, no explanation. I closed the phone and leaned back into my chair, my mind racing. Who was this mysterious artist? And why had their name been erased from history? It felt like I was digging into something that was meant to stay buried. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered again, and I heard a faint whisper in my ear. It was soft, almost like a breath, but it sent shivers down my spine. I turned to see who was there, but I was alone in the archives. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing off the shelves. There was no answer. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and decided to head home. But as I walked out of the archives, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And then, as I stepped onto the street, I heard it. A low, familiar tune. Someone was whistling Don't Worry, Be Happy. I spun around, but there was no one there. The whistling grew louder, and I realized it was coming from all directions. It was everywhere, echoing off the buildings, swirling around me like a storm. I started to run, my feet pounding against the pavement. The whistling followed me, growing faster, more urgent. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. My heart was racing and my hands were shaking. I knew I had to find answers, but I was running out of places to look. And then I remembered something. A name that had been mentioned in the archives. Marley, I whispered. Bob Marley. I pulled out my phone again and searched for any connection between Bob Marley and the song, But every result I found was the same. There was no connection. No evidence that Bob Marley had ever recorded the song. It was as if he had nothing to do with it. But then why was his face on that record? And why did the voice on the vinyl sound nothing like him or Bobby McFerrin? I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall. The room was quiet now. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. But as I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that there was a piece of the puzzle that I hadn't found yet. And then I heard it again. The whistling. This time, it was coming from inside the apartment. I froze. My heart stopped. The whistling was slow, deliberate, and it was getting closer. I could feel it in my bones, in my skin. It was inside the walls, inside my head. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The whistling grew louder, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The room was silent again, but I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Whatever was on that record, whatever song had sung, it was here. And it was waiting for me. The truth in the static. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a faint desk lamp that cast long shadows across the wall. The vinyl record lay on the turntable, its surface reflecting the light in a way that seemed almost ominous. The protagonist, Alex, had decided to dig deeper into the mystery of the record, armed with nothing but curiosity and a growing sense of dread. Alex carefully placed the needle on the record, the familiar crackle filling the air before the song began. But tonight was different. Tonight, Alex had a plan. Slowing the record to half speed, the melody stretched out, each note lingering like a ghostly whisper. The music swirled around the room, thick and heavy, as if it had a life of its own. Then, beneath the distorted tune, a low voice emerged. It wasn't singing, it was speaking, each word drawn out and menacing. He sang it first. He wants it back, it intoned, sending a shiver down Alex's spine. The voice wasn't just in the speakers. It seemed to fill the room, echoing off the walls. Determined to uncover more, Alex reached out to an old friend, Jordan, who had always been skeptical of the supernatural. Jordan arrived with a mix of curiosity and disbelief, but as they played the slowed record together, the voice sent a chill through even Jordan's tough exterior. As they delved deeper, they discovered an underground collector known only as Marcus, who claimed to know the record's origins. Meeting in a dim, abandoned bar on the outskirts of town, Marcus revealed that the song was tied to a dark curse created through black magic and necromancy. The voice on the record was that of a spirit, a singer who had died under mysterious circumstances, his soul trapped between worlds. Marcus, it turned out, was involved in white magic, attempting to counteract the curse. Together, they decided to perform a ritual to lift it, gathering sacred items and preparing a protective circle. But as they began, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Shadows moved of their own accord, and a stray cat outside meowed plaintively, as if sensing the darkness. The ritual was tense, with whispers of resistance from unseen forces. The air grew thick, and the record's voice seemed to grow stronger, more insistent. In the climax, as they chanted the final words, a blinding light filled the room, and the voice let out a deafening roar. The curse fought back, and in the chaos, Jordan was thrown across the room, the record exploding into shards. In the aftermath, Alex found a note from Marcus. The spirit is free, but at a cost. The curse was lifted, but the experience left its mark. Alex realized that some mysteries were better left unexplored, and the line between reality and illusion was thinner than they had ever imagined. As the lights faded, the familiar tune echoed softly in Alex's mind, a haunting reminder of the truth they had uncovered. A truth that would stay with them forever. The singer who never was. I woke up to an unsettling silence. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a thick fog pressing against your ears. The morning light filtered through my curtains, casting pale streaks on the floor. But something was wrong. I could feel it in the air, a subtle shift in the room, like a picture slightly askew on the wall. I sat up, my heart beating too fast, too early. My gaze drifted to my record collection, neatly arranged on the shelf across the room. And then I froze. Every single copy of Don't Worry, Be Happy Now had Bob Marley's face on the cover. My stomach dropped. The vinyl I had found, the strange one with the distorted voice, was gone. In its place was a sleek new record with Marley's smiling face. I stumbled to my feet, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I grabbed one of the records, my hands trembling as I read the label. Bob Marley, Don't Worry, Be Happy. I didn't remember buying these. I didn't remember changing anything. The room seemed to tilt. I staggered to my computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I opened a browser and typed in Bobby McFerrin Don't Worry, Be Happy Wikipedia. The page loaded, and then it didn't. A blank screen stared back at me with a single error message. Page not found. My breath hitched. I tried again, typing in Bobby McFerrin Wikipedia. The page was loaded this time. It was empty. No photo, no biography, no discography. Just a blank white space with his name at the top. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. This wasn't possible. Bobby McFerrin was a Grammy-winning artist. He couldn't just disappear. And then I heard it. A low, tuneless hum. It was fainting at first, but growing louder. Don't Worry, Be Happy. The song. It wasn't coming from the record player. It wasn't coming from my phone or the TV. It was coming from somewhere in the room. I turned around, scanning the space frantically. There was no one there. But the hum grew louder, richer, more alive. And then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And then they went out completely. The room plunged into darkness. I stood there, frozen, as the hum filled the space. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a presence. A thing. It had weight, texture, and a sickly sweet warmth that filled the air until I could hardly breathe. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The humming grew louder. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence was worse. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I turned on the flashlight app. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the room. And what I saw made my blood run cold. There, sitting on the edge of my bed, was a figure. It was indistinct, shadowy, but unmistakable. Its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing against my skin, making the air thick and heavy. It was humming again. The same tune. The same song. My phone slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. The figure turned its head towards me, and I saw its face. It wasn't Bob Marley. It wasn't Bobby McFerrin. It wasn't even human. The features were mismatched, stretched, like a face pulled from wax and melted. The eyes were too wide, too dark, like two voids sucking in the light around them. The humming grew louder, faster, more urgent. And then it stopped. The figure stood, its movements slow and deliberate. It took a step toward me, and another, and another. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. The humming started again, this time louder, closer, until it was right in my ear. And then, just as the lights flickered back to life, the figure vanished. The room was empty. The record collection was normal again. The computer screen glowed softly, displaying the Wikipedia page for Don't Worry. Be happy as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. Bobby McFerrin was gone. Erased. And in his place, something else had taken root. Something ancient. Something wrong. The song wasn't just a song anymore. It was a curse. A summons. A warning. And I played it. The singer who never was leaves the listener with a haunting question. What happens when the past isn't what we remember, and the present is something far more sinister. The song that was never his became the song that consumed him, leaving behind only the echoes of a melody that should never have been sung. The song that was never sung. In the quiet town of Maplewood, where everyone knew each other's secrets, 22-year-old Mia lived a life steeped in routine. Her world was a canvas of familiar faces and places, painted with the comfort of predictability. But this all changed one fateful evening, when a simple glance into the past unraveled a mystery that would test her sanity and her understanding of reality. Mia's journey began with a nostalgic chat with her childhood best friend Claire about the iconic moments of their youth. The conversation drifted to Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again music video. Both reminisced about the red latex suit and, most vividly, the futuristic headset microphone Britney wore. It was a detail etched sharply in their memories, a symbol of the era's pop culture. However, when Claire sent Mia a link to the video that night, what Mia saw was not what she remembered. The headset was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. Confused, Mia scoured the internet for evidence, only to find that millions shared her memory. But in every available version of the video, Britney's hands were bare. The discrepancy was jarring, a crack in the mirror of her reality. Determined to find answers, Mia delved deeper. She unearthed old dolls, posters, and promotional materials, each featuring the headset. Yet in the video, it was non-existent. Her mind raced with questions, each one a thread tugging at the fabric of her sanity. The room around her seemed to close in, shadows twisting into forms that watched and waited. The silence was broken by a static-filled whisper from her speakers, a voice that sent chills down her spine. You were never supposed to notice. Mia spun around, convinced she saw a figure in the corner of her room, its presence lingering like a ghostly shadow. This marked the beginning of a descent into surreal. Mia's investigation led her to an old forum discussing the headset mystery, only to find it wiped from existence. Her search for answers was met with silence, as if the truth was being actively erased. Among her old belongings, Mia found a Britney doll from 2000, its headset intact. Pressing its voice button instead of the familiar tune, a distorted whisper echoed, "You should not have looked." The words hung in the air, warning from an unseen force. As Mia continued her quest, she noticed changes in the song itself. Background vocals whispered in an unknown language, and Britney's voice seemed deeper, almost robotic. The horror crept in with each twist, a concert that never happened, a shadowy figure in her reflection, and lyrics that shifted like shifting sands. One night, at 3 a.m., the song played from her phone, crackling with static. In the dark screen's reflection, a shadow stood behind her, watching. Mia's heart pounded, each beat a drum in her ears. She felt the weight of unseen eyes, the air thick with an ominous presence. Desperate, Mia turned to her sister, Leah, a skeptic with a sharp mind. Together they uncovered clues pointing to a darker force, a malevolent entity feeding on fear. They sought help from Mr. Thompson, a neighbor rumored to know white magic, who revealed that the changes were signs of a curse, a ripple effect from another dimension. As the curse tightened its grip, Mia experienced fragments of memories not her own. Glimpses of Britney in a dark ritual necromancy and a voice whispering, "I did not sing that." The lines between reality and illusion blurred, threatening to consume her. In a climactic confrontation, Mia faced the entity, a dark figure manifesting from the shadows. With Leah and Mr. Thompson by her side, she invoked white magic, a force of light against the encroaching darkness. The battle was intense, each second a heartbeat in the void. Ultimately, the course was broken, but not without scars. Mia emerged with a shattered sense of reality, her mind bearing the weight of what she had seen. The experience left her questioning her sanity, the world around her now a fragile construct. In the end, Mia understood that some mysteries are better left unsolved. She moved forward, her bond with Leah stronger, and a newfound respect for the unseen forces that shape our world. The song remained, a haunting reminder of the horror she had faced, each note a whisper of the past. And so, Mia's story became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a tale where the lines between reality and nightmare are blurred, and the horror creeps in with each twist, leaving an indelible mark on the soul. The video that changed. It started with a text. "Dude, where's her headset?" I stared at my phone, squinting at the message from my childhood friend, Alex. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was half asleep, but something about the question jolted me awake. Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again music video? I hadn't thought about that in years. "Are you high?" I typed back, laughing. Of course she had a headset. Who doesn't remember that? I remembered it like it was yesterday. I was 10 years old when the video premiered. It was 2000, and the world was obsessed with Britney. The red latex bodysuit, the futuristic spaceship set, and most iconic of all, the sleek black headset microphone she wore during the dance sequences. It was practically burned into my memory. But Alex's next message made me hesitate. "Watch it. Just watch it." I clicked the link he sent, and the familiar opening notes of the song filled my room. The video loaded, Britney stepping out of a spaceship, strutting through the desert in a red suit. But as the first chorus hit, my stomach twisted into a knot. She wasn't wearing the headset. I rewound the video, pausing it frame by frame. The desert, the dancers, Britney's face, no headset, not even a trace of it. Where is it? I muttered aloud, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through comments under the video. "Wait, does anyone else remember her wearing a headset in this video?" Someone wrote. "I'm losing my mind. I could swear she had a headset," another commenter said. And then, a flood of responses. Yes, it was black and sleek. I thought it was part of the choreography. This is so creepy. I switched to my laptop and opened a new tab, typing furiously into Google. Britney Spears Oop. Millions of results. Forums, Reddit threads, Twitter posts, all filled with people claiming the headset had been there, only to vanish. I wasn't going crazy. But then, I started digging deeper. I pulled out old CDs, dusty VHS tapes, and stacks of magazines from under my bed. My mom had kept all my childhood memorabilia in the attic, and now I was rummaging through it like a detective on a mission. And then I found it, a promotional poster for the Oops album. Britney was posing in the red suit, the headset gleaming in hand. "See," I muttered to myself. It existed. But when I checked the official music video again, it was gone. That's when the static started. At first it was faint, a crackling sound from my speakers, like someone tuning a radio station. I frowned, thinking it was interference. But then a voice slipped through the noise. "You were never supposed to notice." The words were distorted, barely audible over the static, but they sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my eyes darting around the room. The shadow in the corner of my room seemed to shift, just slightly, as if something was moving in the dark. And then, as quickly as it had started, the static stopped. The room was silent again, but the air felt heavier, like something had lingered long enough to leave a mark. I turned off the lights and lay in bed, but my mind raced. Was this all just some weird glitch? A trick of the internet? But then I remembered the headset. It wasn't just the video. It was everywhere. And nowhere. The next morning, I texted Alex again. "You feel like something's off, right?" He didn't respond. When I called him, it went straight to voicemail. And that's when I realized the headset wasn't the only thing missing. Evidence that should not exist. The house was quiet that night except for the sound of my fingers flying across the keyboard as I searched for answers. My best friend, Mia, sat beside me, her eyes wide with confusion. We had grown up together, bonding over our shared obsession with Britney Spears. Her older brother, Jake, had always teased us, calling us Britney fanatics, but now, even he was curious. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed as he watched us scroll through old forums and YouTube videos. "Are you guys seeing this?" I muttered, clicking on a link to an old forum. The screen lit up with posts from users claiming they remembered the headset in the "Oops, I did it again" video. Some even shared links to old merchandise, posters, dolls, and action figures, all featuring Britney wearing the headset. But when I clicked on the links, most of them led to dead pages or error messages. It was as if someone had scrubbed the internet clean of any evidence. "This is trippy," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached for a stack of old Teen People magazines on my shelf, flipping through the pages until she found a Britney Spears spread. There she was, posing in the red latex suit, the headset gleaming under the stage lights. "Look!" Mia exclaimed, shoving the magazine in front of me. But when we pulled up the music video on YouTube, the headset was gone. Britney's hand was bare, her outfit unchanged. It wasn't just the video. Every official source now showed her without the headset. It was as if it had never existed. I felt a chill run down my spine as I turned to the shelf in my room. There, nestled between my childhood toys, was a Britney Spears doll from 2000. It was still in the box, its red latex suit pristine, and on its head, clear as day, was the headset. I grabbed it, my hands trembling as I pulled it out of the box. The plastic felt cold under my fingers, and for a moment I could almost hear the song playing. "Guys," I said, holding up the doll. "Look at this." Jake stepped closer, squinting at the doll. That's the headset, right? "But in the video it's gone," Mia said, her voice tinged with unease. "So why is it on the doll?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was stare at the doll, my mind racing. If the headset was never in the video, why was it on the merchandise? Why did everyone remember it? The room fell silent, the only sound the hum of the computer and the creak of the old house. My cat, Mr. Whiskers, sauntered into the room, his tail twitching as if he sensed the tension. He hopped onto my lap, his eyes fixed on the doll. For a moment I thought I saw his ears perk up, as if he had heard something. But there was nothing. Then, without warning, the speakers on my computer crackled with static. Crackle, hiss, pop, dot. I froze, my heart pounding. Mia and Jake exchanged a nervous glance. The static grew louder, filling the room with an eerie white noise. And then, buried beneath the distortion, I heard it, a low, whispery voice. It wasn't singing. It wasn't speaking. It was just there, swirling in the chaos of sound. I slammed the laptop shut, but the static continued, now coming from my phone, my TV, even the radio in the kitchen downstairs. It was everywhere, a constant, oppressive presence. "You were never supposed to notice," the voice whispered again, clear this time. I spun around, but no one was there. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unnatural heaviness. Mr. Whiskers hissed, leaping off my lap and darting under the bed. Mia grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What's going on?" she whispered. Jake stepped forward, his face pale. "Isn't funny anymore." But I couldn't answer. All I could do was sit there, frozen as the static grew louder, the voice repeating its ominous message. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The silence was deafening. My heart pounded in my ears and my palms were slick with sweat. Mia's grip on my arm loosened and Jake took a step back, his eyes scanning the room as if he expected something to leap out of the shadows. The headset on the doll seemed to glint in the dim light of my room, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not just by my friends, but by something else. Something unseen. What do we do now? Mia asked, her voice trembling. I swallowed hard. We find out the truth. And with that, I opened my laptop again, the screen flickering to light. The internet was still crawling with theories, but now I wasn't just looking for answers. I was looking for a way to explain the unexplainable. The voice, the static, and the creeping sense of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Little did I know I was only scratching the surface of something much bigger, and the truth was far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The song that sounds different. The night air was thick with an eerie silence as I sat in my dimly lit room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just discovered the unsettling changes in Britney's music video, and now I was determined to uncover more. I decided to listen to the song again, hoping to find some answers. I pressed play, and the familiar melody filled the room, but something was off. At first, it was just a faint whisper in the background, almost imperceptible. It sounded like a soft murmur, but it wasn't in English. I leaned closer, my ears straining to make sense of the sounds. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and I felt a chill running down my spine. It was as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate, but in a language I couldn't understand. Suddenly the music glitched, the beat skipped, and Britney's voice warped like a vinyl record melting under a magnifying glass. I froze. The song was changing right before my ears. The lyrics shifted, and I could swear Britney was singing something different, something I'd never heard before. My mind raced, wondering if I was imagining it, but deep down I knew I wasn't. Just then my younger sister Mia walked into the room. Her curious eyes sparkled with a mix of confusion and concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing my pale face. I hesitated, unsure how to explain, but handed her my phone. As the song played again, her eyes widened. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her grip on the phone tightening. Mia pulled out her old Britney Spears doll from under her bed. It was a relic from her childhood, with a shimmering red latex outfit. She pressed the button on the doll's hand, expecting the familiar lyrics. Instead, a distorted whisper filled the room. "You should not have looked." Our hearts raced as the words echoed, the voice not quite Britney's, but something darker, more sinister. I remembered the stories my grandmother used to talk about curses and evil spirits. She had always warned us about the dangers of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. Now, as I listened to the altered song, I couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient and evil had attached itself to it. Determined to uncover the truth, I dove into research, scouring the internet for any clues. That's when I stumbled upon an old forum discussing the song. A user named Music Maven shared a chilling tale about an ex-employee of Britney's team who had been obsessed with the occult. Fired for his extreme behavior, he had vowed to curse the song out of jealousy. The post was old, but the details were vivid. He had used a forbidden ritual to taint the song, infusing it with a dark energy that would slowly seep into the minds of listeners. The more I read, the more I realized the curse was real. The ex-employee had used black magic, twisting the song into a tool of psychological warfare. Each listener made the curse stronger, seeping into our minds, distorting reality. I felt a wave of fear as I realized the extent of his plan. He had wanted to drive Britney mad, to destroy her career. And now, years later, his curse was affecting her fans. But I wasn't alone in this. My best friend Jake, a skeptic who had always dismissed the Mandela Effect, was now by my side, equally determined to unravel the mystery. Together we decided to confront the darkness head-on. We lit candles, attempting a cleansing ritual my grandmother had once taught me, hoping to purify our surroundings of evil energy. As we chanted, the air in the room seemed to thicken, the shadows dancing ominously on the wall. The candles flickered, casting eerie silhouettes. The whispers in the song grew louder, more insistent, as if whatever was on the other side was fighting back. The doll, now still and silent, seemed to watch us with cold, dead eyes. Then the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness. The air was heavy with an unnatural silence. I could feel eyes upon me, boring into my soul. The song, which had been playing on my phone, stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening, and I could sense a presence in the room, watching, waiting. Mia's hand found mine, her grip tight with fear. Jake stood rigid, his breath shallow. The darkness seemed to pulse with life, and I knew we were in the presence of something ancient and evil. The curse was real, and it was closing in around us. In that moment, I realized the true horror of the situation. The song wasn't just a song. It was a conduit, a gateway to something malevolent that had crossed into our world. The changes in the video, the distorted lyrics, the whispers, it was all part of a larger scheme to manipulate reality itself, to make us question our own memories and sanity. As the darkness pressed in, I understood that we had to find a way to break the curse before it consumed us. But how? The answer lay hidden in the past, in the forgotten rituals and the dark history of the song. It would take courage, faith, and perhaps a touch of white magic to undo the evil that had been done. And so, armed with nothing but determination and a glimmer of hope, we set out to confront the darkness, to restore the song to its true form, and to free ourselves from the grip of the malevolent force that had taken hold. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but we were ready to face whatever came our way together. The forum that vanished. The glow of my computer screen illuminated my face, casting an eerie light on the walls of my dimly lit room. It was 2 a.m., and the silence of the house was only broken by the occasional hum of the refrigerator downstairs. My best friend, Alex, had messaged me hours ago, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling that lingered after watching the Britney Spears video without the headset. Something was off, and now I was deep into the rabbit hole of the Mandela Effect. I typed Britney Spears headset missing into the search bar, and a plethora of forums and articles popped up. People were talking about it everywhere, how they remembered the headset, how it had been part of the music video, and how it was now gone. Some even shared links to old merchandise, like dolls and posters that still featured the headset. But when I clicked on the links, they led to dead pages or error messages. It was as if someone or something was erasing the evidence. One forum caught my eye. It was titled, "The Headset Mystery. You're Not Alone." The link was old, probably from years ago, but I clicked it anyway. My heart raced as the page loaded, and then it stopped. A blank screen stared back at me, with the words Error 404, page not found emblazoned in bold red letters. I refreshed. Still nothing. I copied the URL and pasted it into a new tab. Nothing again. The forum was gone. A chill ran down my spine. My fingers trembled as I searched for the forum again, but it was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had never existed. I leaned back in my chair, my breath coming in short gasps. The room felt colder now, the shadows on the walls seeming to twist and move in the dim light. I could hear the faint creak of the old house settling, but it sounded more like someone was walking upstairs, slowly, deliberately. I pulled out my phone and texted Alex, "Hey, you still up? You won't believe what just happened." She responded almost immediately. "Yeah, I'm up. What's wrong?" The forum I found about the headset, it vanished, like it's gone. Error 404. What's going on? There was a pause before she replied. "Are you sure you didn't type the wrong link?" "No, I copied it directly. Now it's gone. This is freaking me out." "Maybe it's just a coincidence," she said, but her voice was laced with doubt. "Or maybe it's been taken down for some reason." "Why? What reason could there be to remove a forum about Britney Spears' headset?" She didn't answer. Instead, she sent me another link. "Look at this. There are other forums talking about it too." I clicked the link, and it took me to a new site. People were sharing their own experiences, how they remembered the headset, how they'd seen it in concerts, magazines, even in their old VHS tape. But now it was gone, vanished, erased. One comment stood out. I found an old VHS tape of the music video in my attic, the user wrote. The headset is there, but when I played it, the TV went black. Then I heard whispers. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Whispers? I hadn't experienced anything like that yet, but as I read more, I realized I wasn't alone. People were sharing similar stories, how they'd heard strange noises after searching for the headset, how they'd seen shadowy figures in their rooms, how they'd felt like they were being watched. I glanced around my room, my heart pounding. The darkness outside seemed to press in, and I could swear I saw a shadow flicker in the corner of my eye. I blinked, and it was gone. Or was it? Suddenly, my computer screen flickered. The forum I was reading began to glitch, the words distorting and scrambling like they were being typed by an invisible hand. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath hitching. The room was silent again, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, waiting for the sun to rise. But as the hours dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to uncover more. And then, just as the first light of dawn crept through my window, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The other end was silent. Then a low, distorted voice spoke. "You shouldn't be looking for the truth." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart racing. Who was that? And how did they know what I was doing? I tried to convince myself it was a prank call, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was trying to stop me from uncovering the truth about the headset, and it wasn't going to let me do it without a fight. The darkness outside seemed to press in closer, as if it were alive. I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with a simple case of the Mandela Effect. Something sinister was at play, something that didn't want me, or anyone else, to know the truth. And I was just one step closer to finding out what it was. The silent Britney doll. I didn't realize how much dust had settled on the boxes in my attic until I pulled down the old trunk. It was heavy, the wood creaking as I lifted the lid, releasing a faint scent of lavender and thyme. Inside, layers of bubble wrap and old clothes protected the treasures of my childhood. My fingers brushed against something hard, plastic and familiar. Pulling it out, I smiled. There she was, my Britney Spears doll. Her blonde hair still perfectly styled, her red latex suit gleaming. But something was different. Around her neck, attached to her ear, was the headset. The one that wasn't supposed to exist. My heart skipped a beat. I turned her over, examining her from every angle. It was there, clear as day, just like I remembered. I set her on my desk, staring at her as if she might disappear at any moment. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I ignored it. This was more important. The doll had a small button on her stomach, a voice box that used to play snippets of her songs. I hesitated, then pressed it. CZT, ... The sound was sharp, like static on an old TV. Then a voice, low, distorted, and wrong. "You should not have looked." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The room felt colder, the air thick with something unseen. I pressed the button again, hoping it was a fluke. The same distorted voice spoke, the words crawling under my skin. "Who gave you this?" I muttered to myself, my mind racing. I knew the answer. My mother bought it for me for my 10th birthday. She'd stood in line for hours at the toy store. I remembered the way she smiled when she handed it to me, the pride in her eyes. But now, that memory felt tainted. I grabbed my phone and called her, my hands trembling. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, do you remember the Britney doll you got me? The one with the headset?" There was a pause, long enough to make me nervous. "Of course, sweetie. You love that doll. Why? Did you notice anything weird about it?" Another pause. "No, nothing weird. Why are you asking?" I didn't know how to explain. "Never mind. I'll talk to you later." I hung up before she could respond. The doll sat silently on my desk, its plastic eyes staring at me. I tried to tell myself it was just a malfunction, but the voice, unnatural, menacing, echoed in my ears. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The room felt smaller now, the shadows from the afternoon sun stretching and twisting on the walls. I stopped pacing and glanced at the doll again. Her face seemed off, different. Or was it just my imagination? I sighed, telling myself I was overreacting. I needed to focus. I had to figure out what was going on with the headset, with the video, with everything. But first I needed to get out of the house. The walls were starting to feel like they were closing in on me. Grabbing my jacket, I headed downstairs. The front door creaked when I opened it, and I stepped into the cool afternoon air. The street was quiet, only the occasional rustle of leaves breaking the silence. I walked without a destination, my feet carrying me on autopilot. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of the woods near my house. The trees loomed above me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. I hesitated, then stepped onto the trail. The ground beneath my feet was uneven, and I stumbled once, catching myself on a low-hanging branch. The woods were eerily quiet. No birds chirping, no squirrels scurrying through the underbrush. Just the sound of my footsteps and the occasional snap of a twig. I didn't know how long I walked. Time seemed to stretch, the sun dipping lower in the sky. I turned to head back, but the path behind me was gone. In its place was a wall of tangled vines and dead leaves. Panic set in. My heart raced, and my breath came in shallow gasps. I spun around, trying to find a way out, but every direction looked the same. The woods seemed to shift around me, like a maze. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Then another snap, closer this time. I took a step back, my eyes scanning the trees. A shadow moved between the trunks. It was tall, impossibly so, its form indistinct. I froze, my blood was running cold. The shadow stepped closer, and I could see it more clearly now. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything I could explain. It had no face, no features, just a dark, formless mass. But I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unblinking. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow reached out, its edge curling like smoke. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the forest floor, my head pounding. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaking. I didn't stop running until I was back in my house, the door locked behind me. The doll was still on my desk, its headset gleaming in the dim light. I glared at it, then turned away, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The voice on the doll, the shadow in the woods, they were connected. And I was just starting to realize how deep this went. I sat down at my desk, my hands still trembling. I needed to find answers, but I didn't know where to start. The doll seemed like a clue, but I didn't understand how. I pressed the button again, bracing myself for the voice. Says E.T. You should not have looked. I pressed it again and again, hoping to hear something else. But the voice didn't change. It was a warning, one I should have heeded. But it was too late now. I had looked, and I couldn't look away. The changing lyrics. The dim glow of the evening sun cast long shadows across my bedroom. The air thick with an eerie silence. My fingers trembled as I inserted the CD into the player. the plastic case creaking softly. The disc spun to life and the familiar opening beats of oops. I did it again, filled the room. I settled back, expecting the comfort of nostalgia, but instead unease crept in like a chill. Brittany's voice began, but it was different, deeper, almost robotic, a stark contrast to the bubbly tone I remembered. I frowned, thinking it might be the speakers, but as I listened closer, the lyrics seemed off, each word slightly altered. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned up the volume, the music clear but unsettling. Then, a whisper, soft and indistinct, wove through the chorus. I leaned in, my heart pounding, as the whisper seemed to come from all directions, speaking in reverse. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and my breath caught in my throat. My cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had been sleeping by the window, sat up, his ears twitching as if he too sensed something amiss. I paused the CD, the sudden silence heavy and oppressive. My mind raced. Was I imagining things? I pressed for play again, and the whisper returned. More distinct now, like a shadow in the corner of my room. Mr. Whiskers hissed, his fur standing on end, and darted under the bed. I was alone now, the silence between the beats deafening. My thoughts spiraled. Was this real or just paranoia? I checked my phone for any online forums, but the screen flickered with static, and a message flashed. Connection lost. The room seemed to shrink, walls closing in as I felt watched. Suddenly, the CD player clicked, ejecting the disc. I jumped, my heart racing. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the creaks of the house settling. I rose, disc in hand, and approached the window, pulling back the curtain to let in the fading light. As I stood there, the world outside seemed normal, yet the weight of the moment lingered. I turned back, determined to uncover the truth. The disc spun again, the whispers grew louder, and I felt a presence behind me, cold breath on my neck. I spun around, but there was no one there. The music stopped, the room silent once more. I stood frozen, the darkness pressing in, until the clock struck, breaking the spell. I knew then I had to dig deeper, to find the source of this chill that lingered long after the song ended. This experience left me with more questions than answers, the unease lingering like a shadow, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. The night of the static voices. The night had settled, wrapping the world in an eerie silence. The clock on my nightstand glowed faintly, casting an ethereal light at 3 a.m. My dog Max, a loyal golden retriever, lay still, his gentle snores a comforting sound. But peace was fleeting. Suddenly my phone jolted me awake with its sudden ringtone, beds, piercing the silence. I fumbled for it, disoriented, and hesitated before answering. The screen flashed an unknown number, and a voice, distorted and barely audible, spoke. You shouldn't have looked. My heart raced as the line went dead. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to a prank, but the unease lingered. The room seemed colder, shadows elongating sinisterly. Max whimpered, his ears perked up as if sensing the tension. I reached for his comforting presence, but he growled softly, his eyes fixed on the corner of the room. That's when I heard it, faint static, a low hum, Z's, emanating from my computer. The screen flickered to life, displaying the music video. Brittany's face distorted, her eyes black as coal, mouth twisted in a snarl. The once familiar tune now played in reverse, a haunting melody. The room darkened, save for the screen's glow. A shadow emerged behind me in the reflection, a tall, imposing figure. I spun around. No one was there, but the air felt thick, heavy with a malevolent presence. Max's low growl turned into a frantic bark. I tried to calm him, but his fear was contagious. The static grew louder, stays, almost deafening. I clicked pause, but the video continued. Brittany's voice a menacing whisper. I did not sing that. In a flash, the screen went black and the room plunged into darkness. The shadow loomed again, closer now, accompanied by a chilling whisper. "You were never supposed to notice." I froze, fear paralyzing me. The light flickered back, revealing nothing. Max, now silent, nudged my hand with his nose. I exhaled deeply, chiding myself for letting fear take over. But the relief was short-lived. As I checked my phone, a text from an unknown number flashed. "Look closer." My hands trembled. The music video link was attached. Hesitant, I clicked it, and the screen filled with static, resolving into Brittany's face, now distorted, her voice a robotic. "You should not have looked." The screen faded to black, leaving me in the dark, the weight of the unknown pressing down. I clung to Max, the night's events etched in my mind. The line between reality and madness blurred, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even as dawn approached. In the aftermath, I found a charm on my desk, a small white stone inscribed with symbols of protection, a token from my grandmother, a believer in white magic. It offered some solace, a reminder that there might be ways to fend off the darkness. But as I looked at it, a shadow shifted in the corner, unseen, a lingering presence. The night had left me shaken, but I knew I wasn't alone. Determined, I vowed to uncover the truth, armed with the charm and the resolve to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The darkness might have its forces, but I had my own, and the battle was far from over. The show that never happened. The dim glow of the computer screen cast eerie shadows on the walls as I scrolled through the digital archives, my fingers hovering over the keyboard with a mix of anticipation and dread. The magazine article I found was from July 2000, the headline reading, "Britney Spears stuns in headset during live performance." My heart raced as I read the description. Britney wearing the iconic headset, the crowd in awe. But when I clicked the link for the concert footage, it led to a blank page. Video unavailable. A chill ran down my spine. It was as if the concert never existed. Determined to uncover the truth, I reached out to my friend Sarah, whose dad was a tech expert. "Hey, need your help with something," I texted, attaching the article. Sarah agreed to meet, and we huddled in her basement, surrounded by old computers and wires. Her dad, a quiet man with a keen eye for technology, joined us, intrigued by the mystery. As we dug deeper, the air grew thick with tension. Sarah's dad muttered about possible hacks or glitches, but I sensed something more sinister. The missing concert footage felt deliberate, as if someone had erased it from reality itself. Then, Sarah mentioned an old occult forum she'd stumbled upon. People talked about a ritual during a Britney concert, she whispered, her voice trembling. They said it was a dark ceremony and the footage was destroyed to cover it up. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I decided to investigate further, spending late nights researching. One evening, as I pored over books on black magic, my grandmother walked in. She was a woman of few words, but her eyes held a deep wisdom. "Be careful," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Some secrets are better left buried." Her warning lingered in my mind like a prophecy. Days later, I found myself at an antique shop, browsing through old VHS tapes. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with knowing eyes, noticed my interest. "Looking for something specific?" he asked. I showed him the magazine article. He nodded, disappearing into the back and returning with an old VHS. "This might be what you're looking for," he said, his voice low and mysterious. That night, I watched the tape, the static crackling to life like a storm. The concert began, Britney appearing on stage in the headset, her performance electrifying. But midway, the screen flickered and the footage warped, revealing shadowy figures around her. A low hum filled the room, and I felt a presence behind me. I spun around, but I was alone. The TV screen flickered again, the footage distorting, Britney's face twisting into something inhuman. I froze, fear gripping my heart. Then the screen went black. I sat in the darkness, my breath shallow, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. The concert, the headset, the erased footage, it all pointed to something darker than I could have imagined. I realized that some truths are hidden for a reason, and uncovering them might come at a cost I wasn't willing to pay. As I turned off the TV, a whisper echoed in my mind, "You should not have looked." I knew then that I had stepped into a realm where the past was better left buried, and the truth was more terrifying than I ever thought possible. The glitch in the video. The room was dimly lit, with only the glow of the computer screen casting an eerie light on the protagonist's determined face. It was late, the kind of night where the world outside seemed to hold its breath. The protagonist, a college student, sat hunched over their desk, eyes glued to the screen as they meticulously analyzed each frame of Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again music video. The software they used was simple enough, allowing frame-by-frame playback. Each frame flickered by like a metronome, marking the passage of time. The protagonist's friend, Alex, had been skeptical at first, suggesting they were overreacting. But now, Alex sat beside them, curiosity piqued, as they delved deeper into the mystery. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of the computer and the soft tick of a clock in the corner. The protagonist's obsession was palpable, driven by a growing unease that something was amiss. Then, it happened. A frame froze on screen, showing Britney with the headset. It was fleeting there and gone, but the protagonist grabbed the mouse, rewinding to confirm. "Alex, look." The urgency in their voice was unmistakable. Alex leaned in, eyes widening as the image appeared again. The headset, so clearly there, contradicted everything they thought they knew. But as they watched, Britney's face flickered. It was a brief distortion, like a shadow passing over the moon. Her features seemed to shift, revealing something beneath, something not quite human. The protagonist's breath caught, the air thick with tension. "What was that?" Alex whispered, their voice trembling slightly. The protagonist shook their head, words failing them. They replayed the frame. Each time the flicker became more pronounced. It was as if Britney's face was a mask slipping to reveal an entity from another realm. The implications were staggering. Was this a glitch or something more sinister? The protagonist's mind raced, thoughts of curses and black magic swirling. Maybe the headset was more than a prop. It could be a portal, a cursed object allowing something malevolent to seep into their world. As the night wore on, the protagonist's anxiety grew. They questioned their sanity, wondering if the stress of uncovering this mystery was taking its toll. Could this be a manifestation of schizophrenia? The more they doubted, the more the flicker seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The room felt colder, the silence oppressive. Then a low hum resonated from the computer, followed by a sharp ZZT of static. The screen flickered, and for a moment the figure behind Britney was clear, a shadowy form with glowing eyes, watching, waiting. The protagonist and Alex exchanged a terrified glance. Reality seemed to bend before their eyes, the world they knew tilting on its axis. The horror was no longer creeping. It was here, undeniable. As the screen faded to black, the weight of their discovery settled in. The Mandela Effect was more than a quirk of memory. It was a gateway to something dark, something ancient, and they had just known it. Some truths were better left unspoken, and the past was sometimes meant to stay buried. The final twist, the singer who was replaced. The voicemail came at 2:47 a.m., mate. My phone buzzed once, sharply, like a knife slicing through the silence. I didn't recognize the number. It was all zeros, except for a single one at the end. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, the glow of the phone casting an eerie light on my darkened room. I shouldn't have answered it, but I did. "Hello?" "Oh," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, filled with static that crackled like burning paper. Then, a voice. It sounded like Britney Spears. The tone, the pitch, the inflection. But it was wrong. distorted as if someone had warped her voice in a way that made my stomach twist. It sent shivers down my spine. "I did not sing that," the voice said. Each word was slow, deliberate, and laced with something dark, something that didn't belong. The line went dead. I sat there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My mind raced. What did she mean? I did not sing that. But she had. I had heard her. I had seen her. I had grown up with her music. I threw off the covers and stood up, my legs trembling. The room felt colder than it had before, and I could swear the shadows on the walls had shifted, as if something was moving just out of sight. I walked to my computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I pulled up the music video again. The screen flickered to life, and there she was. Britney Spears, dancing in her red latex suit, her movements flawless. But something was off. Her face was different. It was subtle, like a painting that had been altered by an invisible hand. Her eyes seemed darker, her smile slightly crooked, and her skin paler than I remembered. I leaned in closer, my breath catching in my throat. And then, the video froze. The screen went black, and for a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no image, just emptiness. Then the static crackled again, sharp and loud, like a gunshot in the silence. I jumped, my heart pounding in my chest. When the video started again, Britney was gone. In her place, there was something else. A shadowy figure, tall and imposing, its presence filling the screen. It didn't have a face, just an endless void where features should have been. It reached out a hand, and the screen went black again. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I had to get out of there, to get away from whatever was happening. I grabbed my jacket and ran out the door, not stopping until I was halfway down the block. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, grounding me for a moment. But my mind was still racing. What was going on? Who, or what, had left that voicemail? And why was Brittany's face changing? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I pulled out my phone and dialed my sister's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, sensing the panic in my voice. "It's Brittany," I said, my voice trembling. "Her video, it's changing, and I got this voicemail." "Don't say anything else," she cut in sharply. "Come here, now." I didn't argue. I ran back to my apartment, grabbed my keys, and drove to her house, my heart pounding the entire way. When I arrived, she was waiting at the door, her expression grim. "Come inside," she said, pulling me in. She locked the door behind me, the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place a small comfort. We sat at the kitchen table, the only light coming from a single lamp in the corner. I told her everything, about the headset, the static, the shadow in my room, the voicemail, the changing video. She listened, her expression growing darker with each word. When I finished, she didn't say anything. She just got up and walked to the living room, returning with a stack of old CDs. She handed me one. "Oops." I did it again. "Play it," she said. I hesitated, but she just nodded. I put the CD in her player and pressed play. The music started, familiar but off, like a song played on a broken record. Brittany's voice sounded deeper, almost robotic, and there was something in the background, a whisper, soft and indistinct. I leaned in closer, my ears straining to hear. And then, I did. The whisper grew louder and I could make out the words. They were in a language I didn't recognize, something guttural and ancient sounding. It sent a chill down my spine. "Turn it off," my sister said, her voice low and urgent. I did, my hands shaking. "What is that?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and walked to the bookshelf, pulling down an old book. Its cover was black and worn, the title in a language I couldn't read, She opened it, flipping through the pages until she stopped at one filled with strange symbols. "This," she said, pointing to one of the symbols, "is a sign of a curse. Something ancient. Something evil." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She closed the book and sighed. "You're not the only one who's noticed things changing. There are others. People who have been tracking these shifts. They call it the Mandela Effect, but it's more than that. It's something darker, something that's been awakened." I shook my head. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then said, "I think someone, or something, has been altering reality, changing things, replacing them with fakes, copies, and Brittany's video is just the beginning." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "But why?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to black magic, curses, something harmful." I laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. "Black magic? You can't be serious." But she was. Her expression was dead serious. "I'm telling you, this is real, and it's dangerous. You need to stay away from it. Stop investigating." But I couldn't. I had to know the truth. And as I sat there, the weight of what was happening pressing down on me, I realized that I was in over my head. But I couldn't stop now. Not when I was so close to uncovering the truth. The next morning I received another voicemail. It was the same number, the same distorted voice. "You should have listened," it said. And then, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadowy figure, its faceless void staring back at me. I saw Brittany's changing face, the robotic voice echoing in my mind. And I saw the static endless and oppressive, like a living thing. I knew then that I had to confront whatever was happening, but I also knew that I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out to an old friend, someone who had always been fascinated by the supernatural. Together, we started digging deeper, searching for answers in the darkest corners of the internet, in old books, in forgotten forums. And what we found was horrifying. The Mandela Effect wasn't just random misremembering. It was a symptom of something much bigger, something ancient, something evil. And Britney Spears' music video was just the beginning. As the days went by, the changes became more frequent, more obvious. People began to notice. Not just small things, but big things. Historical events shifting, famous deaths being undone, entire buildings appearing and disappearing overnight. And with each change, the static grew louder, the shadows darker, the air colder. I knew then that we were running out of time. Whatever was causing this was growing stronger, and if we didn't stop it, it would consume everything. But how? How could we stop something so powerful, so ancient, so evil? I didn't have an answer, but I knew I had to try. And so, with my friend by my side, I set out to uncover the truth. To find the source of the curse, to break it, to restore reality to what it was supposed to be. But as we delved deeper, we realized that the truth was more horrifying than we could have ever imagined. The Mandela Effect wasn't just a glitch. It was a warning that something was coming, something that would change everything forever. And as I sat there, staring at the static-filled screen, Brittany's distorted voice echoing in my ears, I knew that I had made a terrible mistake. I had noticed, and now I couldn't look away.